County Councillor Susan White, Overmorrow Ward in Monmouth.
County Councillor Penny Jones, Member of Adult Select.
County Councillor Roger Harris, Cresson Ward, Member of Adult Select.
County Councillor Val Smith, Llanbaddock Ward, Member of the Strong Communities Committee.
County Councillor Martin Hickman, the Voice Ward, Abergavenny, and a Member of Adults.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Anne Webb, Member for Tintern St Arvans and Member of the Strong Communities Select Committee.
Delia Hudson, Chairman of the Abergavenny Action 50+.
County Councillor Alan Wintle, Member for Droitwich in Monmouth, and Member of the Adult Select Committee.
Ralph Chapman, elected Member for Mardy.
David Hill, Secretary of Monmouth Action 50+, co-opted Member Adult Select Committee.
County Councillor Tony Easton, Member for Dewstoke Caldecott, also a Member of the Strong Communities Committee.
Kelly Byrne Enterprise. Daphill House had a community delivery enterprise.
Thank you very much. It's back to me, Peter Farley, Member for St Mary's Ward, Chepstow, and Chair of the Adult Select Committee. If the slip and outfield handled the ball nearly as well as that at the Swalex Stadium during the day, Australia will be worried, because I thought that was pretty slick, moving around. Apologies for absence, please, Nicola.
We received apologies from County Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Councillor Smith.
Yes, Chairman, I would like to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest and to cover the whole meeting, because issues will arise. I'm clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you've got the appropriate form, I believe.
I've registered.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yes, I'd like to declare a prejudicial, non-personal declaration as a member of the Monmouthshire Housing Association.
Sorry, Chair. Apologies for absence. Ruth Edwards, she asked me to give apologies. I just remembered.
Councillor Wintle.
I've a non-prejudicial, well, prejudicial, I suppose, interest as a Director of Monmouthshire Housing.
Thank you. As far as I'm aware, none of... Sorry, Councillor Webb.
Ditto for me, the same as Councillor Wintle. Thank you. Member of Monmouthshire.
Thank you. As far as I know, none of those require you to leave the chamber for the items under discussion. As long as you fill your form in, then we have a note of that. Thank you very much. So our first item on the agenda this morning, 4.1, is to do with the Joint Housing Solution Service. This is a service that we have talked about in previous meetings, certainly of Adult Select, and delighted as always to welcome Ian Bakewell to join us and to speak to us. And I believe there is a presentation, Ian, is that right, to go with what you're going to say, or are you just going to speak to it and we look at you?
Yeah, done a presentation. I think the important thing with the three reports that are on the agenda, they're all essentially interlinked, so very much relate to each other. So one presentation that covers the three.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the presentation, I'll just go through this as per the reports on the agenda. So, just by way of a reminder, in terms of the Housing Solutions Service, I know both committees have received reports from us about the service, but I know this will be very familiar to adults. But just by way of a reminder, the Joint Housing Solutions Service that we've developed or developing with Torvine is the basis of our project mandate, Cabinet project mandate, and was approved by Cabinet in October 14. So after that date, we were doing everything to actually get that set up, and it actually we became operational on the 2nd of March. And I say, just by way of a reminder, some of the other aims was about homeless prevention, very much about increasing resilience and capacity due to the financial situation. Joint business processes. We've got very similar business processes to Torvine, not quite the same, but essentially duplication. And I'm really investing in private sector housing in Monmouthshire. And other aims, again, and I think the key one is new legislation that Welsh Government passed, the Housing Wales Act, which made homeless prevention a statutory duty. And the new service was very much a vehicle for helping to deliver that. So again, just as a reminder, prior to the team becoming operational, we had nearly 6 people delivering the housing options service, and that was the team that Karen formerly managed and was operational up until the 2nd of March. And as of the 2nd of March, the new joint team is now that number of people. I've not added up how many people it is. But Karen now is the manager of the private sector housing team on behalf of Monmouthshire and Torvine, and Cheryl Thomas, who was the former options team manager for Torvine, is now the manager of the new housing solutions team for both counties. And so I was keen for Cheryl to come today, obviously by way of an introduction, really. So I felt it was important that you knew the face behind the name. So, and I say, I think the subtle difference really in terms of the new structure really was about the investment in staffing in the private sector housing team. So that's the main subtlety. Just a point really on terms of the that last bullet point. One of the new structure includes a financial inclusion officer, and that's a dedicated resource for Monmouthshire. But what it does do, it replicates a financial inclusion team that Torvine have got. So that was prior to the new team. That was a bit of a gap for Monmouthshire. So that gives us some parity across the 2 counties. So the short-term focus for the team has very much been, it's been about setting up, and probably to be completely honest, it's been a lot more complex and involved in setting up than probably I'd appreciated, which probably the team didn't thank me for. But it was probably easy to lose sight of probably the very low level things that needed to change, probably in themselves, not particularly big issues, but put all those small things together and it does start adding up. And of course, when you're trying to set up, it takes you away from actually delivering the service. And Cheryl gave a quote yesterday, which I thought was brilliant. The scenario has been new teams, new staff, new legislation, new procedures, new systems. Put it all together, and it's quite a complex situation. And I think we have expected a lot of the staff in terms of doing it. And I think the one thing that probably has caught us out a little bit was the extent of the legislation and how that's impacting on the team, which I'll say a little bit more about, and probably the extent of the differences between how the two teams, how the two authorities work. And obviously we're expecting staff to suddenly, adapt to to a new scenario. So, but they've been brilliant. They've really got stuck in, and you know, we are getting there. But as I say, shouldn't underestimate the amount of work that has taken, and that does continue. So, in terms of the service as a whole, we've spent a lot of time with IT and SRS, setting up emails, telephones. We've been training. We've done training with WAG. We've done training with. We've done our own training internally, and I think it's as a result of that training that it's really hit home to Cheryl particularly, I guess, what we need to make, what we've needed to do to make sure that we are legally watertight. And I think there is a bit of a risk in that, because legally watertight's one thing, but what it has done is created some bureaucracies which we're dealing with at the moment, but they exist. So that's something that we've got to tackle, and we've been very fortunate. Welsh Government have been very supportive about the new legislation, and we've acquired access to some quite large sums of money across the two authorities to support the development of the how much is it? Yeah, 277. So, you know, we're talking, you know, so I think there's a vote of thanks really to WAG in terms of the financial support that they have given us. Is it 277? So the Housing Solutions team particularly has been required to get new procedures. And I've used that one as a Section 62 trigger. I'm not going to even attempt to actually tell you what it is, but the long and the short of it is that it's required us to communicate with applicants on a regular basis to notify under what part of the Act that we're working with them in. So how many letters would go out over a case? It could be 3, 4, 6. And, you know, so, and say that the letters themselves haven't necessarily served a material purpose. It doesn't change anything for the applicant, and as a result of letters going out, we're getting phone calls back in saying, what's this letter for? I don't understand it. So that's the sort of bureaucracy I'm talking about that we need to iron out, but it's part of life at the moment. And as I said, the solutions team, they've had to get familiar with each authority's homeless prevention resources and our respective IT systems. Again, particularly for the Monmouthshire staff who we're now sharing Torvine's IT system. So that's been an area of learning. And then with Karen's team, the private sector housing team, again, it's been very much need to start getting familiar with the area. You know, some of the staff have gone from specific roles to more generic, so they're learning new skills, learning new activities. And again, that's obviously that's ongoing at the moment. Karen's had to appoint an accommodation assistant and a financial inclusion officer, but that's done. And we need to, Monmouthshire, we need to change the housing of the agenda later on. And obviously as part of this as well, I've discussed to you before about the Afghan relocation programme. Again, that's something else that Karen's having to manage alongside all this. So both Cheryl and Karen are extremely busy at the moment. So in terms of the benefits, again, it's good news from me. I'll come on to performance, as that I've included that as part of the homeless update. But in terms of day-to-day practicalities, the big change for me is this pooled resources. So we've gone from, in terms of our accommodation, we've now got access to Torvine's accommodation, as Torvine have now got access to ours. And from my perspective, that seems to be working pretty well. I think the situation at the moment is quite tight. The demand for accommodation is pretty much at capacity. So I think there are a few risks, both for Torvine and ourselves, if that demand continues to increase. Could find that we may need to use more bed and breakfast. We're okay at the moment, and we're touch wood, but it does feel we're on a bit of a brink. And I think the other area that's has been really beneficial is the two staffing groups coming together. It's most definitely increased our resilience, and it's probably been more so for Torvine than ourselves. Unfortunately, Torvine have had one colleague that is on long-term sick at the moment, and as an authority, we've been able to support that. But there has been a bit of sickness in the private sector team as well, and again, nothing's ground to a halt. So those staffing comes to that critical group of people is really making a difference. And our IT, I've probably moaned before about our previous IT system. It wasn't fit for purpose, particularly when we're doing statistical returns. Karen spent hours putting things together. We've now given notice that on that, and we're now sharing Torvine's system, and it's still early days, but I think from an efficiency point of view and a good use of staff, it will bring lots and lots of dividends for us. So plus we've saved a bit of money as well by sharing facilities, and obviously that's what the next point really covers. We have made financial savings, so there's just a few examples. The restructure saved us £13,000. The house share scheme is doing very, very well in terms of generating income. The bed and breakfast has reduced and continues to reduce. And as I said, we've acquired grant funding, which will support the budget overall. And I've mentioned the financial inclusion officer. So going forward, we are still very much in a set-up situation, but obviously as time goes on, that will reduce, and we've got to continue ensuring that we are fully compliant with the legislation. And as I said, trying to get to a stage where we're working as efficiently as possible, but obviously making sure that we're legally watertight and minimising any risk of challenge or judicial review or whatever. And in terms of strengthening that arrangement, again, we need to go out to our partners and review and revisit some of the arrangements that we get, because again, it's easy to forget that homeless prevention and housing advice is not just the council. It's very much an integrated and combined approach with our partners. And I've just the bond scheme, for example, that Solace host under Seren is very much a key arrangement for us. It's critical that service works, and we're there is dialogue at the moment with the bond scheme about how we can refine the current arrangement so it works to its max, and obviously we'll have discussions with our other partners. Accommodation. Again, this is an area that we need to better understand, and I think over a period of time there is I suppose the tests of this in terms of compliance is around suitability, and the challenge for Cheryl and Karen is that our vacancies are very, very spread out, and as you would expect, people come through the door in Abergavenny, they want to stay in Abergavenny, completely understandable. Our ability to assist with that can be quite difficult, and the concerns, and I say a bit of a risk going forward, is that the accommodation that we provide, we must be going through a property impact assessment around that suitability, and that's around understanding people's needs, their wants, their expectations. It's even been discussed things such as what church they go to. If they go to church in Abergavenny, but we have to accommodate them in Chepstow, does that mean that we're providing unsuitable accommodation? So it's going beyond the previous concept of suitability, and that will most definitely be a challenge going forward, particularly in the context, as I sit here, there is a shortage of accommodation still to prevent homelessness. Private sector, and again, this is where Karen's team is going to be absolutely critical, is developing those relationships with private landlords. As you know, we've never been able to rely on the social housing stock. There's the supply just isn't sufficient, and if every homeless or homeless prevention applicant was rehoused through the register, nobody else would get accommodation. So it's this ongoing balancing act all the time. So the ability to access the private rented sector is just so critical, and this is where the importance of Karen's team is, and it's about developing relationships, developing confidence with private landlords that they're open to coming to work with us, and I suppose they don't regard working with us as a risk, and we want them to come to us as a first choice. So the offer, in inverted commas, that we make available to private landlords is going to be really important to encourage them to come in. And Karen is actually consulting at the moment with landlords. You've also spoken to the agencies, haven't you? Yeah. So to again try and fully understand exactly what the barriers are and the scope for overcoming those barriers. Another key bit of this, and it sits more with environmental health, but as part of the legislation now, private sector landlords are going to have to be licensed, they're going to have to register, and this is going to be done centrally across Wales, and there's a new team being set up in Cardiff, hosted by Cardiff City Council. So every landlord is going to have to declare that they are a landlord, and that will start kicking in October. But the implications for that is a potential enforcement implications, which would fall on the environmental health team, and so Hugh Owen and Amy Lawton, I would expect. And obviously we talk regularly with them about that. And I've mentioned the housing register. Again, I think the subtlety with the housing register in terms of what we do in terms of the new legislation is getting to a stage where we're working more closely with those in need, as opposed to everybody. A lot of the register are in less need. So, other priorities. There's a lot of expectation from Welsh Government about prisoners being released, and a historical, as long as I can remember, ex-offenders leaving prison and turning up, requesting assistance has been an ongoing battle, because it's all, we never had any notification. They turned up, and obviously there quite often is the likelihood that those prisoners come with risk. So we have to be careful where we place them in the community. So again, that creates another challenge. The good news is there's an expectation that we do start planning for prisoners arriving for rehousing, and a couple of things that are ongoing. We've got a Gwent protocol with police, which will give us early notification of people leaving prison and sharing information. So that gives Karen's team particularly time to plan and look and for accommodation. There is a regional arrangement to calling it a PrEP officer, but again, an individual that will be absolutely dedicated to supporting the release of prisoners, and will be very much a link between ourselves and the police and the prison and probation. And again, we've got a little bit of extra cash from Welsh Government to help us support that process, and I think we can use it as creatively as we need to. Again, we're not really at the firm conclusion exactly which is the best, but I don't think that really matters. We know that we've got a resource, and we can use that flexibly when we need to. Customer engagement. We made it clear right when we set this up. We wanted a service that was very closely linked with our customers and other stakeholders, and we've did a bit of an exercise to get some customer feedback, which I'll tell you later. But that's an area of work that we really haven't made much inroads in, and that's something that between ourselves and Torfaen, we need to agree how we're going to do that. And I'm probably just thinking beyond into the future again. What other opportunities are there for developing the service and delivering further improvements and benefits to both authorities? So that's where we've got to. Any questions?
Thank you, Ian. So the focus is on the service, really, for these ones. We'll touch on the other points in the other reports. Councillor Jones, Penny Jones.
Yes, can I just clarify, Ian? The prisoner release funding that's mentioned here, £51,434, is that for Monmouthshire or is that for the joint partnership? Okay, thank you.
Can I just touch on that, Ian? Is that 51 Welsh Government or is that Home Office money?
Welsh Government.
Welsh Government money, is it? Okay. And the probation officers are provided by who then? When you have prisoners, you generally have a probation officer.
Yeah,
provided by who?
What's it called now? What's the new probation service called?
That's not to that money,
no,
then?
No, that's that. Home serve.
Okay, because it's quite clear there. It says exploring links with private landlords will be a key priority. So your database you have with your agencies then won't be public domain, but it will be a domain that you'll have to work exclusively with to make sure that we actually spend the money within the brackets that it's for, yeah? Okay.
Councillor Sue White and then Councillor David Dovey.
Thank you very much. The private landlord, Karen, I think it was you, are working with local letting agencies. So when a client is placed in a private sector, are you in charge of that client or the letting agency staff if they have any problems?
It would be the letting agents, but they would come back to us with any problems. That's part of what we're offering. If there are any problems, rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, they would come to us and we would get straight in there to try and address it.
Yes, please, if you want to get more clarification on
Yes, yes. I'm just a little concerned. Are they qualified? I know they're qualified in letting houses, but the sort of clients that we have, the needs they have, would they be attentive to that? How would you monitor that?
When we place people, they have support for however long they need support to settle in, to address, financial. We've got our financial inclusion officer. We wouldn't place anybody if there was affordability issues. We assess all that before we place them, and then through the gateway, they would have support from one of the providers, setting up the utilities and everything. And should there be any problems, hopefully the letting agents would come back to us. We'll see what we can do, and we would get support straight back in. Yeah.
It's Councillor David Devey next, but is your question along the same lines or is it different? Well, I only ask because there's an aspect of this that I'd like to pursue, and I don't want to come back to it a few minutes later.
Well, what I was going to ask, because
if I could just have my my sort of query on the back of what's just been said, and then I'll come back to you, David, with pleasure. Thank you. Now, if memory serves me right, when we've talked about this in the past, one of the ideas was that we should actually set up our own letting agency, which would kind of address some of the issues that you're talking about. Have we decided not to go down that road?
Certainly that's still an option. I think probably a key discussion will obviously be in relation to ourselves and Torvine, because I'm not going to sit here and say that the view is completely shared. But yes, it's certainly an option, and I guess probably where we're going at the moment is there's a service that we probably couldn't brand or categorise as an agency at the moment, and I think it's working out what we're doing at the moment, and I suppose giving it a label, giving it clear parameters, and because we're very much in a set-up stage, we've not been able to do that, but the core of what the team will do will be I'll call it the landlord's offer, and that would be the basis of the service, and if we do call it an agency, obviously we can do that, and that's my personal aspiration, that we should do that.
Thank you. And Karen, do you want to add to that, because you're obviously at the sharp end of this?
No, not really. I'd do it tomorrow if we were able to, but at the moment we're still bedding in and finding out what works and what we can offer, etc. So.
Thank you for the answers. I'm not saying why hasn't it been done, but it's interesting that it is still a potential direction of travel. And as we've just heard from Karen, who's actually working, as I say, at the sharp end of these issues with agencies, that it's something that she would like to see happen. We would encourage it, I think, if, capacity and all the other ducks come into the right kind of alignment. Thank you for that digression. Councillor Dovey, thank you for your patience. We'll go to your question, then to Councillor Kevin Williams, then to Councillor Tony Eason and Councillor Val Smith.
Well, it's about accommodation, really, and the increasing number of requirements within it. I mean, you were talking about places of worship being able to be near those, and a number of other things, geographic requirements, etc. We did a piece of work in Monmouthshire. The genesis of it was in Usk, when we were looking at the problems we had with accommodation, and this was about 2 years ago, maybe a little more. And the properties that were empty, vacant, not being used, were identified. And as a result of that, that programme rolled out throughout the whole of Monmouthshire. I know we did it in Chepstow, I'm sure it happened in Monmouth as well, where we were looking at the homes that were empty, that were of potential to us, if you like. Have we gone any further with that, or did it just go nowhere, or is it there still, perhaps as being able to form a base of being able to identify opportunities in various areas across the county, because part of the foot slogging has been done already. I know time has passed, but there is a basis already.
Yeah, I mean, you're referring to essentially our empty homes role. The service that we're providing at the moment, we find it particularly challenging. There are a number of empty properties in the council in the county, and there's ongoing liaison with council tax about identifying those properties. And we did a mail out probably about 4 weeks ago to all the owners of those properties. The reality is, every time we do that, we generally get quite negative responses from the owners in terms of, none of your business, and and quite often the properties that are waiting to be sold, they're probably part of estates, and it just hasn't been straightforward, and we haven't got the staffing to, if you like, really throw at this. I'm sure there probably are some opportunities there, perhaps with some bit more intensive focus, but on the basis at the moment, I feel that we probably dip in and dip out a little bit because of the other pressures. We have got access to a loan facility, again, that was resourced by Welsh Government. So there is a pot of money sat there inviting empty home owners to access it if they've got repairs issues and want to bring those properties back into use. Again, the reality is the demand for those loans is really low. So we have awarded a number of loans over the past, but it's not brought in the numbers that we would want. And a condition of the loan was as well that ideally what would have been great was to actually, well, you can have the loan in return for us having nomination rights, but the conditions from Welsh Government were that anybody could get it. So there have been, I mean, the police station in Abergavenny was redeveloped using those loans, and it's most definitely made a contribution to Abergavenny. It's brought an empty property into use. It's enhanced the area, but as a service, we've not actually been able to take full advantage. So it's there, but it's not really bringing much to the table.
Yes, we must move quickly. I may have to rearrange the agenda a bit.
Just so I have it very clear in my mind, the money's there, and you're saying it's not brought results in. Is that because we don't have the resource to explore it fully and, if you like, sell it to the places where we would be interested in?
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it, that we haven't got the resource. I don't think it's particularly an attractive loan facility. You're required to put a charge on your property. Again, I think that puts people off. You could probably get a cheaper loan at a high street bank. And a lot of, I suppose, the easy wins are where you've got lots of properties that are in poor condition. We haven't got that situation, and we're quite fortunate that we've got generally stock in pretty good condition. And our environmental health colleagues have surveyed all the stock that's been empty over 6 months, with a view to trying to identify an opportunity to create an intervention, because the stock wasn't in poor condition. That's as far as environmental health have gone with it.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley. Councillor Williams, Kevin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Some interesting ideas and concepts there of local authorities providing housing. Oh, that's an interesting one. I remember watching a programme on telly, must have been about a year ago, where one of the councils in England had converted an olfactory unit into some units for singles, couples, and a couple of family units as well. I wonder, would there be any possibility of doing something like that? Because in South Wales, particularly in the Torfaen area, we're overrun with massive empty factory units. You've only got to look at 2 in Pontypool, for instance, Park Davis, ICI, where those sites are just empty and have been empty for years and years. Would it be possible, perhaps, just to look at, maybe creating something there that would alleviate that? To me, the project that they created was tremendous, and it brought people who were homeless straight in once it was finished. And the other thing I want to ask is, do you use, for the B&B, things like Premier Inn, Best Western, Metro and the likes of those? I know there was some talk where, after the incident in Algoid, that actually these people are in Premier Inns and things like that. I just wondered, do you use them? It's just a general question, that's all. Thank you, Chair.
I mean, in terms of we're completely open to absolutely any opportunity in terms of redevelopment. And Shirley Wigham, who you're probably aware of, pretty much camped out with planning colleagues. And so there's just an ongoing dialogue going in terms of identifying potential opportunities. Again, Torfaen as a county is obviously very different to Torfaen, but yeah, we'd certainly be open to anything. I think the only thing I would be wary is, the big buildings, what big buildings can result in terms of accommodation and placing lots of young people all under one roof. But that's but I say, to answer your question, yes, we'd be open. With regards to B&B, generally we don't use the chains. Certainly Monmouthshire have used, we've got a set number of typical B&Bs that we generally use, but if push come to shove, we would use the likes of those accommodation if that's what it took, but that would be absolutely exceptional and very, very rare that we'd have to do that.
Thank you, Kevin. That's a good point. And I take it that, and I'm looking to officers at the back of the room, I take it that when we look at the prospective disposal of assets, I'm thinking of places like Boverton House, for example, in Chepstow, that one of the items for consideration is whether, in fact, they could be used to suit some of the purposes that we're talking about here. Is that the case? Can you enlighten us?
When we consider the disposal of assets, we look at our alternative uses, and all internal service departments, service areas have the opportunity to bid for that property before it goes to the open market.
Thank you very much. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think what I would add is, as Ian said, there's no shortage of opportunities. We could look at any piece of land the council's about to dispose of. We could look at Hillston Park, Gilwan. We're not short of opportunities. What we are short of is the investment and the resources to actually do something with these buildings. And I think very often in my experience, what we found is it's far cheaper and far better use of money to build from new rather than to comprehensively redevelop an existing building, which tends to be much more expensive. And as Ian says, in management terms, then you've got lots of people under one roof, you know, which does cause a whole variety of issues and pose many, many, many different problems as well. So we've got to think about the quality of life of the people who would participate in schemes such as that and their living conditions as well. So as I say, no shortage of opportunities, no shortage of vacant buildings, pieces of land. What we are short of course, is the money to do something with them.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members so far have asked questions about the operations of the scheme. Can I ask some questions about the resource implications of the paper presented to us today? The scheme has got I presume I'm on the right track here. The scheme has got a pilot basis for 1 year. I can't see you turning the clock back on that. But the resource implications on the pages says that you save £55,000 over 3 years. Is the viability of the scheme such that it can continue into the future? Because it seems to me you won't be going back to single operating councils. They will be coming together. And really, £20,000 a year, will that be whittled away to become no savings in the long term? Do we see the long term to create more savings?
Personally, as resources are at the moment, I believe that we would be in a reasonable position going forwards after the period. Obviously, there comes a point when the council would need to make a decision how far the extent of any budget reductions. But the situation we're in at the moment is really on the back of some of the changes that we've done. And so the shared housing service, for example, well, that's generated an income for the council. That's expanding and that's working well. On the back of that, we've not had to use bed and breakfast, and that's bringing dividends. So I genuinely believe that there is still scope. There is further scope for reducing our costs and scope for more income. Obviously, we've just talked about the lettings agency, and again, that's why I would be keen on the lettings agency, because there's scope to bring further income into the council. So at the end of the 3-year period, we're not going to collapse as things are at the moment, albeit there is still a question mark about, that will all be subject to demand, because if demand does increase, it is quite a fragile position, and it wouldn't take a lot to be in a situation where we had to start using lots of bed and breakfast again. So I say no signs of that at the moment, but it's just a point of caution, really, should demand increase too quickly, really. So
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith is next. Val Smith.
Thank you. I see the scheme that's proposed almost as a middleman's intermediate scheme. Now, some years ago, Monmouth did actually operate its own letting scheme, didn't it? Its own managing properties. Also, looking at legislation to come and encouraging private individuals to use their properties, not to let them sit empty, I think perhaps registration might be a disincentive. It's another bit of paperwork and leave it. But we did operate a scheme within Monmouthshire County Council some years ago.
Yeah, and that still exists. You're referring to the private leasing scheme, which we originally managed directly at the point of stock transfer, but nothing was set up right to manage that, and we transferred that to Mellin Homes. So Mellin Homes are operating that for us at the moment, and that works very, very well. Torvine have actually got about 50, 60 private lease properties. So we've got something that we can potentially build on again, and there is a discussion coming up with Mellin about their future plans with regards to the management of the scheme. So, but any of this could all support the proposal going forward, definitely.
Thank you. I think next is Councillor Anne Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there in Monmouthshire a local authority landlord registration scheme, or is this only in England? Does this apply in Wales, whereby landlords pay a certain fee in order to have their property examined and put on the register for a fee? Does this apply in Wales, or is it only in England at the moment?
Yeah, it will apply in Wales from October. So the new team's just been recruited and will be operational from October.
What is the fee for that, please?
Ooh. I don't know. Yeah. 1,500.
Between £50 and £100 for registration. Not sure of the figures yet.
Seems very, very reasonable.
Councillor White, I think you want to come in. And Kelly, did you want to add anything to this? Okay, thank you.
I do have a homeless hostel in my ward. Is it the only one in the county? And that was 2 cottages put into one, which seems to work very well, 2 small cottages. So I'm just wondering if there is a need for any more homeless hostels, if there's small properties somewhere that can be converted. Don't think it took that much to convert them.
I mean, that is always an option. I guess we've not really been down that road, partly because of the capital, and I think other alternatives have kicked in. I think probably the one area that I do feel that we do need to review is the supported housing schemes that Hill House and Woodstock House. And we've had there's been recent discussions with Supporting People colleagues about those schemes. I think that will gather pace over the year, and obviously they do partly go hand in hand. So,
thank you. I think Kelly, you wanted to help us out with some aspect of this, didn't you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the point, really, the very critical point that Councillor Eason raised about finances and sustainable efficiencies as we move forward, because we were talking as a leadership team yesterday, and the budget gap that we're looking at just for next year, before we even begin looking at the medium term, is about £6 million. You know, it's massively significant. These are massive figures, and the pressure is on. And I sometimes think it feels a bit unsavoury to talk about income generation in the context of such an important statutory service. But I think one of the big challenges for housing as we look forward is to think about how we move from being dependent on the public purse to ever more self-sufficient. So savings are one thing, but they're one-off. You know, you can never recreate those things that you lose again. So we've got to be very careful before we make some of those big decisions just to cut and to shut, because you can never get those things back. So I think things like scaling up the shared lodging scheme, you know, is it something that we could potentially license to other local authorities? Thinking about the private landlord arm, the lettings agency, the marketing approach. Could some of these things generate additional income? Careline. You know, that's going to evolve. Telecare, you know, there has to be some element of commercialisation here. And I think with Deb as well now being responsible for the housing department, because that brings together assets and housing, estates in quite a nice way. One of the things that we've been pondering as well is perhaps our own property development. You know, we sell lots of land, we sell assets, we sell farms, we sell barns. You know, is there an element of work that we can do? So one, yes, that plays into homelessness and creating additional supply, but also we can start getting some of the development value of our assets realised rather than just selling it off to the private market all of the time. So I think these things have to be front and centre in the future. It can't just be about savings, it has to be about income generation too.
All right, I'm going to close this one down now for a number of reasons. We are running very short of time before our next guests. But the next Economy Select is going to look at the assets portfolio, I believe, in greater detail. What I'd like to do at this point is to thank Ian for taking us into the paper. And it's interesting, the pre-meeting didn't indicate anything like the kind of points that might come up, but that's a message about being in pre-meetings. What I'd like to do is to ask members, first of all, whether they would wish to see at a future meeting, unspecified, a further report on the progress of the development of this service. it is something that you wish to keep under continuing review. And I would say to Ian that depending on other matters, it can either come as a standalone or, as you've done here, linked with other items. But that is the wish of the committee. So I think we thank Ian for that report. I think we should congratulate all concerned in both authorities for the way they have come together and are moving forward. And it's good as a byproduct of our discussion to realise that, you know, there is a continuing process of change. There aren't blinkers on. Some other possibilities or early ideas whose time has not quite come yet are still under consideration. This is quite a vibrant process, and so thank you, all of you here, for that part of your contribution. I'm going to ask us to go to 4.3 now, because we should be able to do that relatively quickly. That is to make a recommendation to Cabinet. And then we'll come back after item 5 to 4.2. So item 4.3 is to recommend to Cabinet some minor amendments to the housing allocation policy. Can we cover this fairly?
Yeah. I mean, it's. I don't think it will serve a lot of purpose if I went through them all individually. They are all very, very minor changes, no real material impact on applicants nor staff. And as I say, they're really tidying up changes, really, that we need to do, largely because of the housing. The new Housing Act, and I say probably the easiest way is deal with any queries if there are anything about any individual points.
Yeah, I appreciate it's a bit awkward for members because we're taking things out of sequence, but this is a relatively self-contained thing, and the background is already in the papers that we've looked at and have yet to see. Councillor Webb, did you want to come in on this one? Misunderstood. Sorry, Councillor White, I misheard the prompt. Did you want to come in on this item?
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, Councillor Howard.
Can I ask a question? And I think it just reflects on the agenda item 4.1 there, is we as councillors do have many representations made to us about private landlords, and if you are in a private landlord's property on the register, you actually cannot move yourselves out of 4 and 5. It's quite difficult because I think a lot of our tenants do like the security of being not within the private sector, even though we are relying on the private sector. How are we actually making it any easier for people to go with a landlord which is within our banding, i.e. Melling, Charter, Monmouthshire Housing, etc. It's one of the biggest criticisms we do have is the banding side of it. Once you're in 4 and 5, that brings you down to private landlord side of it, and it's quite clear in the document. Are we doing anything more to ease this on our constituents?
The changes that we proposed at this stage don't cover that side of things. What our intentions are, and discussions have already started with Monmouthshire Housing, Charter and Melling about a larger review, and the issue of the private sector will most definitely come up as part of those discussions. And Councillor Howard's quite right. You know, the number of queries that the options team get, not just from individuals but from support agencies as well. There is a disadvantage with the private sector because they may have to move out after 6 months. Sometimes the properties aren't quite as good as we would like them to be. The rents obviously are high, plus there's other costs. So it's completely relevant, the point. Again, I guess it comes back to yourselves really and the council in terms of how you ration an absolute scarce resource. That is the bottom line. And of course now the housing legislation is now pushing us down the private sector route. We can now discharge our duties into the private rented sector, which will mean more people will actually be expected to go into the private rented sector. Now, at the moment, we've actually discharged probably very little duty into the private sector purely because of the lack of opportunities. But I don't really know what the answer is. You've got a critical issue, and it's very much a balancing act and rationing that scarce resource. And whichever way you go, you will displace somebody, something, somewhere. But it most definitely will be part of the discussions that we have as part of the Home Search Partnership.
Can I just step back in there, because in the last item, 4.1, we did set an LDP. We do have targets to set on delivering affordable homes within that LDP, and they were set, I think, quite rigorously by the inspector as well. I think they even upped them, didn't they? So it's up to us as a duty to actually deliver as many as we can. But I am hearing out there, Ian, that it is becoming really difficult now to deliver within some of the sites that we're putting forward. How are we going to try and address that? Because that comes back down to the team at the back as well. Is because it's okay for us to say we're going to try and deliver a percentage, but we quite clearly know we've got to deliver that percentage. Because if we don't deliver that percentage, the Minister or the Welsh Government will come back on us and tell us, well, what you didn't deliver that term, you'll have to deliver in the next term. So is it not in our interest to actually do a little bit of work on that as well, as working with our associations in trying to deliver what we've promised to deliver?
I mean, that's just an ongoing priority as we sit here. Shirley Wigan particularly works extremely closely with all of the partners. We're pushing the partners to be as resourceful and creative, as innovative as possible. Obviously we work with Deb and Ben's team in terms of identifying opportunities. So Councillor House is quite right that part of the context of this discussion is there is housing association, or there's a need to develop as we're going along. But however successful we are, I suspect we will never achieve our demand. And again, as an authority, we need to look at other ways of how we're going to accommodate people. And it will be the private rented sector in certain different guises.
Okay. Now, there's going to be an extended session on this in Strong Communities on the agenda for the 16th of July. So I suggest, to which members of Adult Select will also, of course, be welcome. It's not a joint meeting, but it's an opportunity, and I think this is where we can also bring up again the points that have already been made elsewhere today and in other meetings about the connection with planning. So I think that might reassure you that there will be an opportunity to go into it in more depth. Councillor Smith, do you still have a question?
Very briefly, it was an article that I read. There was an authority, I can't remember which authority, that was publicly advertising for public funding from individuals into housing initiatives, into a housing initiative, and saying, well, this is a 10-year scheme, something like that, and what was going to be. It struck me as very good. I'm sorry I didn't cut it out, Chairman, but it would be worth researching. Actually, a council going out publicly and saying to the public, have you money that you would be prepared to invest in housing within this authority?
Right, I still say this is a matter for the meeting on the 16th, but if you could prepare yourselves with more detail on that, that would be very helpful. I'd like to go now to the recommendation on 4.3, which is that basically this goes to the Cabinet, or not, as the case may be, having been looked at by this committee. So remember, the amendments have been described to us as being small. This is a highly complex area, but this is just one part of the jigsaw. We've noted the contents of the report. Are we, as two committees, prepared to recommend to Cabinet the approval of the amendments to the policy? If you are so minded to recommend approval, would you please indicate? Okay. That's fine. That's. No councillor actually said no, did you? Am I right? Sorry, one abstention. So yes, clear majority of.
Session on the 16th of July. So raise my points then.
I can thank you, Tony, for that, because the focus today was more intended to be on welfare reform than on some of the things that we've got into. But it's so difficult to disentangle them. I'm very much sympathetic to the difficulties of teasing one out and not another. So as it stands at the moment, we've said yes, we're accepting the recommendations, and we will convey that to Cabinet. Councillor Wintle, did you want to have another word?
Could we also convey to Cabinet that no developer should be allowed to slip out and not produce the social housing element of any development? As has happened in Monmouth, there's two sites there which are in excess of 12, 15 houses on each site, and there's no social housing element on it because the developer said he couldn't afford it.
Okay,
he should be told to go away.
I don't think we can be so specific on this particular one. What I think we can say is that we do make the recommendation, and as we do so, we note that there are other opportunities to go into detailed discussion on some of these issues, and that there is a link with planning. I don't think we can go much further than that on this paper today.
Can I just ask for a caveat to be put in there as reference to the discussions about the private sector and how the difficulties we have, and just something put in there to say that we explore this even further and work on it, making sure that our tenants, the residents of Monmouthshire, have the opportunity to go up to the next banding wherever possible, let's say. I think it is important because it has been out there that everybody is receiving them kinds of complaints. Yes, we recognise we're going to have to rely on the private sector, but there are people who are in the private sector who don't want to be in the private sector, and we represent them as well, and I think we need to make sure that we've covered that within this document.
Can we do that? Would you accept that, a slight addition? Do we accept the recommendations with a couple of notes, one for other discussions, and two, that we would want there to be, we need to capture that crisply. Can you give us a form of words?
I was just going to say that in terms of the policy development, you'll be fully involved as a committee, because the changes will be a little bit more fundamental than the minor changes that we've discussed, and it would be appropriate to obviously do a proper discussion.
So what we can certainly do then is to note that there will need to be further development of this policy, and among the reasons for that is the question of people's ability to move between bands. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear in 4 are regarded to be adequately housed. The adequately and not adequately and over adequately could be banded, perhaps with private landlords. Yes, okay, their houses or whatever, but it may be that they may have damp on the walls. It may be that they have problems with them houses which come under a bracket which doesn't give them the right to be lifted up to a bracket, but at least it'll be identified. I think that's the important thing, is making sure that
Okay, we can't rewrite this now.
No,
I think
no.
what we've got to do is make sure we've got enough sensible pointers towards further development. And if we can agree that, then I think that's enough. So have you got a sufficiently clear recommendation, Nicola? Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you, members. We're now going to go to item 5, and then we'll go back to 4.2, I think. So what do we need to do? Do we need to... These people, you will get them to leave. And they're not needed for 4.2. No. Can I thank all of you who have contributed to the first item? Richard, you've got a life sentence today, haven't you? So you're here for the next one. But thank you very much indeed for coming to talk about the service, and good luck going forward. And then we've got some more guests to take your seats. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome now to a new cast of characters. Welcome to people who've not been here before. Can I remind you that this meeting is live streamed, and therefore for the benefit of our viewers worldwide and in Greece thinking of moving here, would you like to say who you are and what organisation you're from? And then I'm going to ask Richard to lead off with his presentation. Would you mind going first, sir?
Press the button. Are we okay now? Are we live? Okay, I'm David Morris. I'm the Director of Housing and Communities at Monmouthshire Housing Association.
David, thank you and welcome.
I'm Catherine Edwards. I'm the Corporate Director of Charter Housing.
Catherine, thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm Tom Broadhead. I'm Assistant Director of Communities, Enterprise and Performance at Melling Homes.
Thank you and welcome.
My name is Justin Wigmore. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing at Melling Homes.
Thank you. And the rest we already introduced. So we're in your hands. Thank you.
Right, thanks for the opportunity for me to come and talk to you this morning about welfare reform. I must admit, following on from the last item, I sit before you as an example of a successful shared service. The shared benefit service between Torvine and Monmouthshire has been an undoubted success. And in football parlance, we've moved from 21st and 22nd in the Welsh Premier League to 2nd and 3rd in terms of our performance. So I just thought I'd get that plug in before we go any further. As the Chair has indicated, we have existing welfare reforms, bedroom tax, benefit cap, and changes to the social security agenda that the government have introduced, or the previous coalition government introduced. We have perhaps more immediate welfare reforms that are going to be introduced today by the Chancellor this afternoon, and we'll find out more about what those changes are likely to be. But we have an expectation that there will be cuts in social security spending of around £8 billion over the next 2 years. And then we have the presentation that I've done for you, which talks about the next stage, which is all about universal credit. But I think we need to be mindful that we have existing welfare reforms, and we also have the welfare reforms that are going to be announced today, and they are putting quite considerable pressures on administration in registered social landlords and in local authority benefit administration, and having a wider impact, for example, upon teams like Ian's. The paper I put together for you today is about universal credit, and I don't propose to go through it in full detail, but I will. We haven't got it on screen, but we've got the paper version in front of you. Universal credit, I hope you're all aware, is a new benefit, and it is replacing 6 other benefits that are currently means tested for working age people. It's going to be administered by Job Centre Plus. So whereas at the moment housing benefit is administered by Monmouthshire as a local authority via the Shared Benefit Service, in future housing costs will be administered by Job Centre Plus, with a few exceptions. But only for working age people. For pensioners, we'll continue to administer their housing benefits. The aim of universal credit is to simplify the benefits system and to make work pay, increasing work incentives. The idea is that it will also simplify administration, bringing together the administration of benefits in one claims process.
Sorry, Richard, I don't suppose the microphone will come closer to you. I wonder if you
Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry, am I not audible?
There is a bit of a dip in this part of the room. If you, do you mind?
Right, testing. That's 1, 2. Okay. So the purpose is to simplify administration so that there will be one claim process as well. Universal credit has been the subject of a series of trials and pilot schemes. In fact, there was a pilot scheme in Torvine called the Direct Payment Demonstration Project, quite a pithy title, but it was about encouraging tenants to receive their housing benefit directly and testing their sort of circumstances and their behaviours around that demonstration project. And it helped to inform the DWP about universal credit, actually. And universal credit is subject to a series of rollouts now across the UK where the Department for Work and Pension are testing the scheme and against different household types. It is being introduced in reality, though, and has been rolled out for single job seekers since April. So in Torvine, we were part of what was called Tranche 1, and single job seekers, so i.e. people that were going to their job centre to sign on for job seekers allowance, were also told that they had to claim universal credit as part of that sign-on process from 13th of April. In Monmouthshire, that process starts on 21st of September. So anyone going into a job centre in Abergavenny, Chepstow or Caldicot, they will be told that if they're a single job seeker available for work, then they will be part of universal credit. Those in receipt of legacy benefits, i.e. those that are receiving housing benefit of working age and still having their benefit administered by the council's service, will gradually be migrated to universal credit up to 2019. The process should be complete by 2019. But I must say that that timescale, timetable has been subject to delays already, and you'll all be aware of issues around the Universal Credit computer system and the difficulties in bringing in this piece of administration. What the government are trying to do is incredibly complex, it must be said. So who does Universal Credit in Monmouthshire apply to? It will only apply to single job seekers, as I've said, and only apply to new claimants turning up to claim job seekers allowance. That means from 21st of September, just to reiterate, they will have their housing costs paid by Job Centre Plus. Those claimants, if they're liable for council tax, will still have to make a claim to the council for council tax reduction. The DWP will not administer that benefit as it is a local benefit. So the inherent principle of Universal Credit, which is to simplify the system, actually doesn't wholly simplify it. We still have two claims processes, one for council tax reduction and one for other benefits. We estimate, and this will give you an idea, that this is a relatively low-key implementation at the moment, that in the region of 15 claimants per month will fall under this provision. So it's not a big deal because we have around about 6,500 claimants who are receiving council tax reduction and housing benefit in Monmouthshire at the moment. But it's a gradual process. It's important to say who will not be affected. Some people will continue to claim housing benefit from the local authority, including those who are homeless or live in temporary or supported accommodation, those who are sick and not fit for work, those who have caring responsibilities, those who have more than £6,000 in savings, and those who have a mortgage or own their own home. Once a person is in receipt of Universal Credit, they will remain on that benefit, and indeed we have one Monmouthshire customer who has come from a different part of the UK, from the northwest of England, who fell under one of the other pilot schemes, who moved out of Caldicot, went to the northwest of England, claimed Universal Credit, and he's come back now with his Universal Credit. He's moved back in with his partner, and she's got to claim Universal Credit as well. So the vast majority of existing claimants in Monmouthshire, and ongoing actually, will not be affected by the change. Over 50% of those that claim help with their rent or council tax in Monmouthshire are pensioners, so they fall outside of this scheme. In terms of the claims process, customers are being encouraged to claim digitally, online, and there's plenty of evidence that that isn't proving a problem in the pilot areas. Over 80% of claims to date in Torvine have been made digitally, and where the customer isn't able to make their claim online, then they can either have a telephone or face-to-face interview. After the customer has made their claim, and as a local authority, we've said that we will assist the customer to claim online where possible. They're required to attend an interview at their local job centre plus, where details of their claim will be verified. They're also required to agree to the claimant commitment, which means basically that they have to show a regular and ongoing intention to seek work and provide evidence of that, including, for example, job searches, online searches for employment. The Job Centre Plus officer at that point will assess whether the claimant requires budgeting support and or digital support. So whether this will be the first time, if you think about it, that potentially that one of these customers will fall into these arrangements, and there's an opportunity then, therefore, to assess their personal circumstances and their ability to manage their finances. This is setting out the operational system that we will be implementing in Monmouthshire. So the next slide says that the Job Centre will contact the Shared Benefits Service to advise if budgeting support is required we will then arrange for the support to be provided. I think it's fair to say we've still got to find out those details. The intention is, we were at a meeting with the Chief Executive and the DWP, Ian and I, a couple of weeks ago, and he indicated that he would like to replicate the system that we've put together in Torvine, where we use Communities First. But it may be that a tenant claimant is already receiving support from their landlord with the personal budgeting support. It doesn't seem sensible, therefore, to go somewhere else and duplicate an arrangement that's already in place. If the claim is successful for Universal Credit, moving on to the next slide, the first payment will be made 5 weeks after the initial date of claim. So the claimant, the customer, will have to wait in total 37 days. There are 7 days to wait, and then there's a month added on top of that before they receive their payment. The idea of this is that it's a monthly payment, and we will include all of their benefit entitlements, including the rent element, the purpose being to replicate a salary payment, if you like, and so how, you know, the household expenses, direct debits, etc., will follow on from that. It is possible for alternative payment arrangements to be applied in limited circumstances to assist claimants to adapt to Universal Credit. And of interest to colleagues sitting alongside me at the moment is the potential to have their housing cost element paid directly to the landlord, or the customer being paid twice per month instead of monthly to help their financial circumstances bed down, or potentially splitting the payment between the claimant and the partner. And the purpose of that potentially being to preserve, if the payments all go to, for example, relating to childcare costs to one partner, then making sure that that the payments are split so that that there is an even distribution of the finances coming into the household. Alternative payment arrangements will be reviewed by the DWP, and if there's evidence that a person is able to afford their rent, then it could be that this is a short-term measure. It's also possible for a customer to have an emergency advance payment, so potentially in that first 37 days, if they realise that they're going to have difficulty in paying certain bills, they can apply for an advance, but that will be recouped quite quickly from their ongoing Universal Credit payment. As I indicated earlier, we've been dealing with welfare reform for the last, 5 years, certainly in earnest. And the DWP have tested the implementation of Universal Credit as an idea on housing organisations in pilot schemes, including Bronavon and Charter in Torvine. And the purpose of that was that it helped to develop a policy whereby landlords in certain circumstances were safeguarded, or the tenancy was safeguarded for a particular claimant by switching the payment from the claimant to the landlord. But it must be said that landlords, I'm sure there will be comments from the table here, are concerned that Universal Credit could lead to rent arrears as due to non-payment, as other household expenses compete with rent for priority. And I'm sure we'll hear as well that landlords are putting in place appropriate arrangements to support tenants and ensure that they can manage their money and obtain the assistance they require. We've got a couple of examples then on slides here for Monmouthshire of how the RSLs in Monmouthshire have begun their preparations for Universal Credit. Monmouthshire Housing Association has identified a group of existing working age tenants across the county to be paid housing benefit directly. They were all profiled and interviewed as part of the sign-up to the project, and they're also including new tenants now. We have, I don't know, is it over 100?
115 now.
115?
115, yeah.
Yeah, now receiving housing benefits directly, the purpose of which is to mirror what would happen under universal credit, and indeed to prepare these tenants for the eventuality of what will happen under universal credit. And similarly, Charter have selected tenants who are in receipt of partial housing benefit, and we've introduced 2 tranches of their tenants to direct payments. Over 70 are now part of a direct payment scheme. We've got a further 50 who are being interviewed at the moment with respect to their exercise. So preparations are taking place, and landlords are seeking to raise awareness of what will happen with direct payments and to prepare for it. Indeed, Bronavon still have 700 tenants receiving housing benefit directly who were under the previous arrangement at Torvine, and that system is working relatively smoothly. Just a brief note, finally, on lessons that we have learned from the initial work on universal credit from Torvine. I mean, this is relatively small in number compared to the other welfare changes that we are dealing with, bedroom tax and benefit cap. This pales into insignificance at the moment, but it is something that will gather momentum through this year and into next year. So that's why we're making you aware of it now. So experience to date at Torvine. This trial started on 15th of April. We have 38 claims that have been that we have been made aware of. 11 have received universal credit so far. Some of them have been outside of that 37-day deadline. 21 have made council tax reduction claims, and 3 of the 38 have been referred for personal budgetary support because they're unable to manage the finances or need financial help. So the numbers are small, but the administrative arrangements have worked generally quite well, given that it's a new scheme. But there are communication issues, particularly we have noticed between the DWP and registered social landlords. It's a new requirement for the DWP to speak to landlords and to engage with them, but they are learning about it. They put in place a new direct contact arrangement so that landlords can call them if they're aware that a tenant is in receipt of universal credit. But I think that there's more progress to be made on that. And not all customers have been directed by DWP to claim council tax reduction, and that's very important to us as an authority, because potentially we could lose income as a result of that, or we could be sending out reminder notices or summons notices to people who are on relatively low levels of income who should be receiving help. That's something that a point that we're trying to get across to DWP that they need to be aware of. So that's it in summary. That's the position with regard to universal credit at Monmouthshire. It's coming in 21st of September, and I think it's important that you're all aware of it.
Richard, thank you very much. I think what we should do is give our guests an opportunity to say something from the perspective of their organisation, and then we will be in a better position, I think, to go into questions. And we can ask questions directly of an individual organisation or through Richard, of course, on behalf of the councils. Are you content with that arrangement? So could we do it in the same order that we did to introduce ourselves? So would you like to start off and tell us what your activities are, please?
Yeah, as far as Monmouthshire Housing is concerned, I think picking up on one thing Richard said was that clearly there are bigger numbers affected by the bedroom tax and the existing welfare reforms. But without a doubt, as far as us as an organisation goes, universal credit has far more potential to impact negatively on us as a business and a housing provider. The reason for that is that currently £3.2 million of our income is paid to us direct in housing benefit. So, by 2019, we'll be in a position where we have to recover that money directly from our tenants. And in the backdrop to that, if you look at our current situation, is that 53% of our tenants are currently in debt. You know, our tenant insider is telling us that we have tenants who have multiple debts. These are not people who have got just one debt, but often, you know, 2, 3, and 4 debts. 63% are worried about bills, 11% can't pay their bills at all, and nearly a quarter are saying that they have used doorstep lenders, just to give a sort of indication of the impact on our tenants and where they're going for help, really, with regard to that. I think we've mentioned the direct payment pilot, and although I think that's very useful in trying to re-educate tenants that they need to start paying an amount of money to us for their rent, the problem with the current pilots are that they're not in real time effectively. It is only housing benefit that we're talking about. Universal credit covers a whole plethora of benefits, and what will happen is that they will receive this one lump sum once a month and have to manage that monthly. And what we're finding from the direct payment pilot, I think significantly, is that most people actually pay more than once in a month. They try and pay their rent using different payment methods as well, and they make the payments over the month because they're used to budgeting weekly. You know, these are people who are used to getting the benefits weekly, and that's how they budget. So there's a whole mindset that I think we're trying to change there. But the little bit of research that we've managed to do to date, it's very difficult to look at any trends. So in the direct payment pilot, we're not able to get any trends from that. You know, it's a very chaotic picture, and I think we're not really surprised at that, because I think quite a lot of our tenants live fairly chaotic existences, and this has been thrust upon them, and they're trying to adapt to that. I think also with regard to the bedroom tax, we have seen a reduction, perhaps fortunately. At the beginning of the bedroom tax, we had 385 tenants affected by that. That's now down to 279. But again, 154 of those, so well over 50%, are in arrears and are struggling to cope with that. 8 of those have arrears over £1,000. And although we've introduced Smart Move, which is an incentive scheme to try and encourage people to move, and we've moved just over 30 people now through that scheme, you know, we're still finding that a lot of people affected by the bedroom tax, although they've registered for a transfer, have not bid for properties. They're not bidding for properties actively. So I think that's a flavour, really, of the reforms and how they might impact us. As an organisation, we have an inclusion section, and that includes our work and skills-wise team. You'll probably hear very similar initiatives from each of my colleagues, so I won't go into great detail. But I think in Monmouthshire, it's probably worth, in Monmouthshire Housing, it's worth realising that 56% of our tenants are working age. And then out of that, we've got just over 1,000 who are in employment, which leaves us with about 470 who would class themselves as unemployed, and a similar number, actually, who class themselves as chronically sick, long-term sick, or disabled. And those percentages, both of unemployed and chronically sick and disabled, are far higher than the Monmouthshire population per se. And we shouldn't again be surprised at that, because we're a registered social landlord. We're providing social housing for people who are vulnerable and often in need. With our Way Into Work scheme, we work with our tenants and we provide a 6-week training package which tries to move them from the position they're in so that they are, quote, work ready. I have to say our experience is that a lot of our tenants are very, very far from the workplace. The sort of support and intensive support we're having to give is very time consuming, and you don't see the results immediately. We've managed to get 20 tenants into work, 7 of those affected by the bedroom tax, by the welfare reform to date. Those don't look like big numbers, but for those 20 people, it's made quite a difference. Although the caveat to that is that there are issues around some of the people we've got into work who are now in larger arrears than they were previously, because that brings a different set of challenges for people when they enter the workplace. 35% of people who are in employment are in employment of less than 24 hours. And clearly there is, the national statistic in Wales now, there are more people in poverty that are in work than people out of work. So we need to bear in mind that work is not the panacea and the answer to everything. But we've had some success. We've placed 64 people into work placements, into volunteering opportunities. We've signed the volunteering pledge with MCC, and we're keen to explore that with the sort of work that Owen is now doing with you as an authority, because clearly that is a way of building people's self-esteem, their confidence, and getting them a little bit further on that spectrum towards being able to work. What we are hoping to do is to build the Work and Skills-Wise programme into people's claimant commitment. So with the JCP at the moment, we're working with them to try to get to a point where we say, look, don't put these people in sanctions. If they're working with us and they are actually engaging with us, then surely that can be something that we can work together on. So we are trying to do that. We do work in partnership in Monmouthshire, and I think one of the successes we've seen have been the jobs fairs. The most recent one in Caldicot, we saw well over 300 people attend. So I think there are significant numbers there. We also work with Monmouthshire County Council on the Way Into Work scheme, and we've seen 29 young people who've gained employment through that. And all of these people are living in Monmouthshire, they're residents in Monmouthshire. It's going back into the Monmouthshire economy. A couple of other things that we do quite quickly. We have a MoneyWise scheme, so we look at giving income and energy advice. And the last financial year, we supported nearly 500 of our tenants through that scheme. And over 200 of those were affected by welfare reform. And through both benefit advice and savings advice, we were able to increase their income by £350,000. And on average, that's between sort of £750 to £800 per person. Again, may not seem like incredible amounts of money, but to those families, to those individuals, that makes a significant difference to affordability. Where we go on our MoneyWise scheme, on our income and energy scheme, is quite an interesting thought, and I think there needs to be more discussion around where are the gaps in sort of support through debt, income, energy in Monmouthshire, and I think that's a debate that needs to go on. For ourselves, we've seen that we've developed specialisms within the team, so they're now able to support people who are appealing against PIP decisions, for example. But those take time. So for us as an organisation is, do we put the resource there, or do we put the resource into specialist debt advice for the people who've got multiple debts? Because that word pro rata give a better outcome for us. So we're having those debates internally. I think externally and in partners we need to have a further debate around where are the gaps in provision. We've also got a WEPWise scheme, because digital inclusion is obviously a very important part of welfare reform. But I think one of the lessons for us at the moment is, what does digital inclusion look like? And taking up Richard's point, I think most of our tenants have got smartphones now. They're not really interested in a laptop. They're not really interested in any broadband schemes that you can give them. They just want to access it out and about where they are on the go. The problem with smartphones are you can't fill in a 60-page universal credit form on your smartphone. So I think one of the keys for us is supporting people accessing that form, helping them to fill it in. So it's about what access points do we give, where do we give them, so that they're digitally included at that point in time for the purpose that they need to make sure that they comply with this process. So I think some of the things that we want to talk about will be around streamlining those processes. Richard touched on the processes with the DWP, and I'll finish perhaps just with our one universal credit case that we have, because it's thrown up a lot of issues for us. The guy moved back to Caldicot, so they are then claiming universal credit. They are something like 7 or 8 weeks into that claim, and they have had no money at all. He has managed to secure a job. They are now in £600 worth of rent arrears, having never been in arrears before. We contacted the DWP last week to say what's happening here, because they keep getting the same message from the DWP, and that is the check's in the post, it will be in the post next week. When we got through, they said, no, this case is suspended at the moment because we haven't seen their conditions of tenancy. So there's a breakdown in communication, most definitely, and processes definitely need looking at and refining. We are concerned about discretionary housing payments going forward, DHPs. We know that's probably not sustainable. That can have a massive impact to our bedroom tax cases. So I think these issues, digital inclusion, debt advice, DHPs and processes, and what support do we give as a landlord, are definitely things for future discussions with yourself and other partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A lot of food for thought there. You're going to go next.
Okay. If I go next. David's given you a really sort of good and detailed picture there of some of the profile of tenants, some of the impact, and we see a similar picture. We actually have a higher proportion of working age households amongst our stock. Obviously, a lot of our stock is newer build, has families in it. Probably about 80% of our homes have working age households in them. So potentially a bigger impact amongst our tenants. As Richard mentioned earlier, we were part of the demonstration project in Torfaen for direct payment of housing benefit, and we didn't have huge numbers of tenants there involved. It was just under 100. But what we did see there, initially certainly, was a massive increase in rent arrears, about 300% at one point. That's, when things start off, over time, when we work with people, we managed to bring that down, but we never recovered that position back to where rent arrears had been. Rent arrears go up, so that will happen. Debt will increase under universal credit, and rent arrears will go up. Also, as Richard mentioned, because of our learning through that and thinking, okay, well, we really need to start to prepare our tenants now for what's about to happen, not just wait for these massive changes to hit people. We need to be telling people about this and working with them to help them manage when this happens. So we've started building off what we learnt in Torfaen. We've started in Monmouthshire, working with Richard and his team to identify, we've profiled our tenants, and we've identified groups of tenants that we can start to move on to direct payment of housing benefits. So we started out really with the lower risk group. So people already in receipt of partial housing benefit who are used to paying an amount of rent themselves. We started there, first of all, with people with partial housing benefit, no arrears. Then we moved on to people with partial housing benefit, arrears under 150. We're about to start with people on full housing benefit, but with no arrears. So by August, we should have about 120 of our tenants on direct payment of benefit. And people, what we're finding is it's very labour intensive, as David has mentioned. We probably spend, for every hour we spend with any other case, any other person, where we're talking about their rent or arrears, we spend 6 hours. So for every hour we spend everywhere else, we spend 6 hours with people when we're preparing them for moving on to direct payment. But if we do that, it pays off. This is really having conversations about people's bank accounts, how they're going to pay, how they're going to budget, linking them into any other initiatives we've got. As David mentioned, we've got the money savers that can help people look at how they save money on their utility bills. We've got employment projects. We can link people into other things as part of that conversation. And what we have found so far, everyone we've switched so far is paying, which is good. They don't always pay regularly. Again, that very kind of irregular payment pattern is common. People paying, because they're not used to budgeting monthly. But we have yet to come to those people who are the more challenging, really, the people full housing benefit and with arrears. We have already so far identified, I think, about 30 of our tenants who we don't think it's appropriate that they move on to direct payment. So we would hope, under the arrangements with Universal Credit, they would have the APA, the alternative payment arrangement, and have their benefit paid direct to us as a landlord. And we hope, having gathered the evidence about why we think that's the case, in terms of their vulnerabilities, we'll be able to use that as an argument with the DWP when the time comes. The problem will be us knowing when that's happening with those individuals, really as things move forward, because even though that arrangement is meant to be in place, as was mentioned, around DWP informing us when somebody moves on to Universal Credit, we've only had 2 in Caerphilly so far, but that hasn't happened. We weren't told. By the time we found out, the individuals had spent the money. So that's it. It's very challenging. A lot of it's for us, as a business, it's a huge concern in terms of our income stream, because obviously the higher our arrears, the less money we're collecting, the less our ability to do the kinds of things, to run the kinds of projects we do around getting people ready for work, helping people budget their money. So there's a human cost as well as a sort of a business cost. And also there's the potential further on, if our income is badly affected, around our ability to build, our ability to develop and to produce more homes, because if we're having to divert more of our income to the support for our tenants and getting less money in, then we've got less money to do the other things that we're here to do. There was one of the some of the other kinds of impacts really of some of these changes, and I just wanted to mention a bit of a case study as well, as Davis has done the same. It's not directly linked to direct payment or universal credit, but there are rafts of other things going on in the background with some of these changes that we don't always, we don't realise the implications of some of them. But we've had a case study of one of our tenants living here in Monmouthshire, in a rural part of Monmouthshire, and it's to do with changes they've introduced around EU migrants, which everyone believed were aimed at sort of those migrants from Eastern Bloc countries, where they're trying to stop benefit to recent migrants from those EU countries. We've got one of our tenants, he's actually a Dutch national. He's lived in this country for 9 years. He worked for almost 5 years continually in employment, but he had a brain hemorrhage. So worked intermittently then for a while, but was obviously, because of ill health, was not able to hold down a job. DWP have assessed him and decided that because of his ill health and where he lives, there was no real prospect of him getting work again. The chances of him getting back into employment are slim. So they stopped all of his benefits. They took everything away from him. We found out, obviously, because he was no longer able to pay his rent. He ran up £1,700 of rent arrears with us. We challenged the decision of the DWP. We went to court, challenged the decision. We're very lucky in that in our staff team we have someone who is a real expert in benefits. Challenged the decision, and we won the appeal and managed to get all of his benefits backdated. But if we had not had that expertise, that man would be homeless with nothing. And those are some of the other things that are happening in the background at the moment around some of the changes that are being introduced. So it's a real concern for us.
Thank you very much indeed. Are you able to go next?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I mean, ditto a lot of the stuff that Dave and Catherine have actually said. It is a huge concern to us, massive effect potentially on our income. And really, from our perspective, it's a journey which we started along back in June 2010, as Richard alluded to earlier, when the whole spectre of welfare reforms was first brought up in an emergency budget. At that point in time, we had a team of just 4 people dealing with collecting rent. And that was probably all they did. In terms of actual support at that time, we didn't do that much. That team of 4 has now become a team of 9, and we've got 3 full-time people within that team who purely provide support to our residents, mainly in the form of money advice. Last year, within Monmouthshire, they worked with 282 of our residents, and they managed to put £190,000 plus into our residents' pockets in unclaimed benefits and various grants which they claim for them. As part of our journey, the main things we've come across are the bedroom tax and the benefit cap. The bedroom tax we've managed to deal with. We weren't as badly affected as a lot of other people were. At the moment, we've got 34 people actually affected by the bedroom tax within Monmouthshire. Something that did affect us was the benefit cap, which hasn't been mentioned yet. That affected us because we run the private sector leasing scheme within Monmouthshire for homeless people. And we found, particularly in the larger properties, 4 beds, even 3 beds, people would go over that benefit cap, which was set at £26,000. I'm sure most people are probably aware now. The latest I've seen is it was going to come down to 23. They're now saying 20,000. I'll be very interested to see how many more of our residents that actually affects, because the main thing about that is what they do cut first is housing costs. And we had some people who were left, I think the least they had to pay was 50 pence a week. And we had people, all their housing costs were wiped out apart from that 50 pence a week. Fortunately, we had a relationship with Richard and the housing benefit team where we took the opinion, well, these people, when they went into these properties, the benefit cap wasn't there. It wasn't their fault. And we did everything we can via the discretionary housing payment budget to actually alleviate the hardship they were in. Unfortunately, as time has moved on, we've had to give back some of these 4-bed properties to the landlords who we leased them from. We just couldn't make them work. We couldn't make it stack up. Unfortunately, this does bring difficulties then to my colleagues within MCC as to how they're going to house these larger households. Something else we've seen over the last year to 2 years as well is the rise in the use of food banks. I've got some stats which we actually, bear with me. We gave out 71 food parcels within Monmouthshire last year. That's something that, like I said, when we started off this journey on welfare reform back in 2010, we didn't deal with food banks. It's something that we do now. We've looked at basically our resident base within Monmouthshire. We estimate we're going to have 487 people potentially affected by universal credit. We do have a higher number of working tenants probably than MHA, and again, similar to Catherine, a lot of our stock tends to be new build with younger families moving in. We're trying to get the message out about universal credit. We use social media, we use our various publications that we send out. So we're trying to get that out. But something we're very concerned about is that we don't want to frighten people. And I think we potentially have been guilty in the past of when the reforms were basically, we had a set timetable for things to be implemented. We sort of stuck to those and were putting out information that universal credit will be coming in at a certain point. And we realised that that was actually worrying to a lot of people. So we stopped doing that a few years ago. And it really is play it by ear. And like Richard said, I think they're on about 2019 for it to be extended out to everyone. Those goalposts seem to move all the time. And it's very, very difficult to know what to say to people and at what time to say that to people. I mean, something else we've realised is that we can't do everything by ourselves. And we've tried to work with the CAB within Monmouthshire. We've actually provided the premises that they're actually in now on the main street in Abergavenny. We give that to them at the peppercorn rent. And they do some work for us in return, which is of great benefit to a lot of our residents. We've been involved since April with the universal credit rollout in Torvine. Our experience there is we've just got one person who's come through to us at present. Luckily, this person, tradesman, found himself, he was out of work, he went along to the job centre and he actually rang us. So this is probably going to be the exception and not the norm, that we're going to find out that way, that someone is on the path to receiving universal credit. As it is, he still hasn't had any money yet. I think he's 4 weeks into it, so we don't quite expect it at this point in time. But we are speaking to him on a weekly basis. He actually rings us as well. I could only hope that this is the same experience we have with everyone, but that's unlikely to be the case. I mean, I've got a case study probably of some of the work we do relating to our money advice team, who I mentioned earlier on, and it relates to one of the homeless properties that we actually manage. I can find it amongst all this. Yeah, it relates to a single mum we had who was homeless. She'd been evicted by a private landlord, served notice. She had on a short hold tenancy there. But she had absolutely nothing in terms of any finances to buy the essential household goods which she'd need to set up a house. And this is some of the work that our money advisors do now. We managed to get discretionary assistance funding for £330 for her, for a washing machine, bed and bedding. And we also applied to something, the Vickers Relief Fund. and got £200 there to buy her a fridge freezer. We also provided food parcels and baby food and nappies. We've also been in touch with Circulate Recycling for any other household items she may require. That just gives you a flavour of some of the other stuff which we're doing with people to get them ready for a tenancy and get them set up, because what we don't want to do is go along after 4 to 6 weeks and find them there living in an empty shell, really, struggling to pay their rent. Do you want to say anything about our works sort of programme?
So, hello. One of my roles within Melon is to manage our Melon Works programme. It's been going for about 3.5 years, and in the last 3.5 years we managed to get over 2,000 people into employment training or skills. But in the last 18 months specifically, we've been targeting people impacted by welfare reform. So we've got a specific approach to the 5-stage model. We're working with tenants, either who are in arrears or who are threatened with the impact of the welfare reform. And as alluded to before, there are all different stages of work readiness. It's quite a complex programme, but we also see activity around that ramping up over the next few years regarding whatever the statements come out today in terms of the budget. We see employment as one element of the sort of tenancy sustainability approach, because that's one way we can sort of guarantee people can sustain the tenancies going forward.
Thank you very much. No?
No, David's.
Okay. I don't know where to begin, really. And some of the things that need to be begun are probably best not done in this room. But in all seriousness, if anybody, having listened, would now like to ask any questions, that's your opportunity. And thank you very much, Roger. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Sounds like a potential accumulative disaster, and bearing in mind the leaks that have come out about what's going to happen this afternoon, what do you reckon the situation is going to be like in 6 months' time from your point of view?
I think at the moment it's difficult because we don't know what timetable is actually going to come out with whatever changes they plan this afternoon. And the one thing we have experienced is the trickle effect of universal credit, and it is like a drip feed effect, and it comes about very, very slowly. We could well be sat here in 6 months' time, I think, aware of a further raft of reforms, which are going to be very worrying, whatever comes out. But whether we'll be any further along the line in regards to actually people being affected by them, I don't know. I think the obvious thing is that we will have some universal credit claimants in Monmouthshire.
Just to say, this position with universal credit administration in Monmouthshire is not going to change. We've been advised until, obviously we've got the changes starting in September, but no further changes are going to be made with universal credit until April. Yeah, but with the budget proposals that we're likely to get today, most, I would anticipate, would take effect from next April. But it has been, I mean, this is an emergency budget, so it's quite possible that we will have changes that take. The benefit cap, for example, was introduced in September of 1 year, so most benefit changes tend to be introduced in April. So it's possible that we will have some changes that take effect between now and April. So I'd say that.
Yeah, I mean, a number of potential things about to happen that worry us. The withdrawal of benefit from young people, 18 to 21-year-olds. We do have a number of tenants in that age range. What happens to them if their benefits suddenly stop? These often are vulnerable young people that have come, have been supported to be able to move into their own homes. A real worry for us about what we would do with those young people if they don't get their housing costs covered. The benefit cap has been mentioned. A quick glance at our tenants, it seems to indicate anyone really with more than 3 children is going to have a problem if the benefit cap is reduced to 20,000. So our large families will lose money. And again, how will they make up the shortfall in their rent? We don't know. So there are, who knows, but there are a number of elements of what may happen that are quite a worry for us.
Yeah, I think just briefly, I think having a trickle is okay, and sometimes that's a blessing, but when you're trying to prepare for something, it's exceedingly difficult. I'm sure all of us would say it's very difficult to know what sort of structure we can provide support-wise that's going to be fit for purpose going forward, what that support looks like, what sort of specialisms we need to be designing and providing. So I think there are it's the unknown really that makes it extremely difficult to plan for this. And within the business cases, as Catherine said, as you know, all three organisations are considering, you know, what are our priorities going forward? Are we going to be able to build going forward? Because obviously the flip side about affordable housing, and there's a cycle that needs to be broken there as well. So, yeah, just huge anxiety, I think.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Harris? Did you get sufficient?
No. Obviously, the general consensus is that it's going to get worse for you. It's as simple as that. It has to be, doesn't it? Thank you.
Councillor Easton, Tony Easton.
Yes, thank you. It's really to do with the application for universal credit. That person makes an appeal, makes a claim. That may take 2 to 3 weeks to be agreed. Is that correct? Which on top of that is another 5 weeks before they get a payment. So for your housing associations, you could be looking at £1,000 debt even before they start getting their feet off the ground. And at the same time, from the Monmouthshire perspective, where would the contribution for council tax be coming from? Would that be another debt which would take some time to claim and pull back through? In other words, are the DWP, are the housing benefits and the housing associations in talking to each other when these things happen from the start rather than wait till the end?
Can anybody answer that?
Okay, I'll give it a go. I mean, one of the features of the arrangements that are in place at the moment is, well, I'm sitting here at a table with housing professionals. We talk to one another on a regular basis. We have liaison arrangements between the local authority and registered social landlords. Indeed, with private landlords, we have, on the whole, pretty good links. As I said in my presentation, the DWP is having some difficulty getting used to that concept. Yes, and the fact, and it's the registered social landlords who are complaining that the DWP are not communicating with them, and I think we've had some instances that have been pointed out here. With respect to council tax, that claim is made to the local authority, and it's very important that claimants, when they go in and claim universal credit, are advised by the Job Centre Plus that they need to claim help with their council tax at the same time. And then they have a responsibility to tell us that a claim has been made. And what we found in the Torvine scenario is that they haven't always been telling us that information. We've been finding out afterwards. So we've said they must tell every claimant to claim help with their council tax as well as the other range of benefits that they're claiming.
Can I come back on that, Chair? I understand that the DUP have got electronic links directly with yourselves and not what. Why is that failing? My daughter works at the DUP and says this is the case, but is it really working?
No, it's not working. I can tell you why. I can tell you why, because, I mean, I can see it from at the coal face, if you like. It's all very well introducing these things. You've got to have the computer processes and the administrative processes to support them, and they're not there at the moment. So, for example, at Torvine, we were told it was starting middle of April and that we would be receiving claims. But we don't have the automated processes that are in place for other benefits. Now, that's because the DWP are developing those processes as they develop the computer systems around universal credit. So they've introduced the administrative process without having the other arrangements in place. So your daughter is quite right.
By my reckoning, Councillor White.
And
you had a question, Councillor White?
I've got observations. Yes, I have. I was so glad to hear Melin talk about food banks. Those are your food banks. There are food banks all over Monmouthshire run by mothers' unions, churches, church halls, community halls. We will never know the amount of food that is given away in this county, but thank God it is. And just knowing that you do 71 as your organisation, I would dearly love to know, and I would love everyone to know how much people are being supported. The other grumble I have is that we do not have a job centre in Monmouth, and we have a great need for one in Monmouth. Not all people in Monmouth own cars, even bicycles. How can they get, in bad weather especially, with babies in pushchairs, to Abergavenny, Chepstow, Caldicot? We have begged, Monmouth Town Council has begged, just one day a week, come to the one-stop shop, just try and facilitate these poor souls, and people will become homeless because they can't get there, and it's deemed that they're not bothering. That is a big worry, and it's a tip of the iceberg.
Obviously, Job Centre Plus isn't represented here today, but others... no, I'm not. You're absolutely right to ask the question, Councillor White. There are quite a few people who are not in the room who should be here being held to account for some of the things that we're talking about. But Richard, you do have something to say on this.
Yeah, just on that point, I think it's a point that has been made very, very widely. I understand the Job Centre Plus are going to make some provision in Monmouth to place representation. I don't know the exact dates, but I know that whenever the question is asked, they have said that they will be making provision. Well, they will need to put something in place for this from 21st of September.
Once again, we're saying how organisations are caught out by the enormity of things. Are the Job Centre prepared for what will happen when they spread themselves thinly?
I've got to be careful what I say here, because there's nobody looking. There were some indications when the Torvine project, when Torvine started, that Job Centre Plus staff were not aware of the provision for universal credit. Indeed, the first claim that went through Cwmbran, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it. The first claim that went through Cwmbran Job Centre, they treated as a job seekers allowance claim when they should have treated it as a universal credit claim. We picked it up and pointed it out to them, but they sort of carried on without changing their administrative arrangements. I'm sure they're, thinking of the wider world. They've learned from that experience and will never make that mistake again. But you're quite right. When administrative arrangements such as these are introduced, then they need to make sure that staff on the ground are aware of the full consequences.
You're generous, Richard, and I'm sure Councillor White would not have expected another kind of answer from what you've said. But it is an issue. And it is, like many of the issues here this morning, it's an issue which is in large part outside of the chamber, but other people's actions, wittingly or unwittingly, have huge impacts on organisations. And, we're talking about universal credit, but, some of this is universal butt passing, is it not? Councillor Kevin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. A friend of mine years ago worked in Monmouth Job Centre, then it closed and he was moved to Cwmbran, and now he's in Pontypool. From the experiences that I heard, I think DWP have difficulty communicating with themselves, never mind anyone else outside of it. As regards the job centre, Councillor White, I don't think you're missing much. You go into him these days, met by a security guard, and he points you to a TARDIS-like computer at the back, which is nigh on useless to try and find any information out of anyway. So I don't think you're missing a great deal. They could probably put it in Tesco's, you'd have more people look at it. My concern, this whole system of universal credit, the waiting 37 days, it's not an ideology that I subscribe to, thank goodness. People in the private sector are also going to be hit by this, and you guys do a tremendous job as social landlords. Who's doing it for them, I wonder? you know, the numbers that this is going to hit. It's the tip of the iceberg. These figures are minuscule, you're right, but they're only little dabbles at the edges. When this fully hits, it's going to devastate people. It's going to devastate single people, families, the larger families. What do you do with them? You know, what do you do with people when they get into a state where there's nowhere else to turn? They turn into doorstep lenders, they turn into loan sharks, payday lenders, just to pay the rent. And this is going to be a major problem. It's good to see that the social landlord side of it, you know, you're doing things to alleviate that. Again, food banks in this day and age, we're giving people food in food banks to help them survive, because we're making them wait 37 days to get any money when they've been, and through no fault of their own generally, turfed out of work. The factory gates have been locked. My day job, I do it on a daily basis. I was in a mine in Nice last week where they've all been told, ta-da, you're all finished at the end of the week. 60 people. They've got to go through this process. Several of them even refused to do it because they were that proud. It's a big problem. And looking at the responses that you've put in, you've coped with it up until now. How do you envisage that you're going to be able to cope with this in the future? I mean, Roger suggested it. Surely it's going to come to a stage where it's impossible. You know, where does it end? I know it's an open question, but, you know, I just appreciate something of maybe it's not going to. Thank you.
You don't have to answer. That's about prophecy, rather, and scrutiny is about what's going on. So you don't have to answer the question, but you can if you wish.
Okay, well, I'll try and answer in part. I think if we are able to, first of all, if we're able to be successful in terms of working with the DWP to identify those people, and we reckon it's about 30% of our tenants who won't cope and will never cope with universal credit, and get them. But the trouble is, an alternative payment arrangement is still being seen as a temporary solution. I think the reality is, for that 30%, that will have to be a permanent solution. Depends what happens with that, how far we get with that. If we can safeguard those 30%, and I said I mean safeguard in terms of the income as a business, but also them as individuals, and the strain on them, you know, because there's all the other consequences for health and when people are under that kind of pressure. What we did find in Torfaen is if we do some intensive work up front and we really support people through being able to settle into a pattern of payment, the majority of people can cope. They do manage. They will adjust their behaviour. A lot of people still have quite a. They set up a pattern of payment which is not as we would like it as a business. It's not a one-off payment. It's bits here and there. But they manage. Then you get some people in between where we will constantly have to work with people. So in terms of our resources, I think there is an enduring resource implication. There's a big hit of really helping people prepare. That will die off slightly, but we will always have to do more for some, and that's a reality. And all of us, again, you know, it's not just that's around a focus on managing their income, but what we have all had to do, I know we've had to do, is increase wider support as well. We've got people in our organisation who we've seen an increase in issues around mental health, you know, things like depression, and we've got staff in place who work with our tenants to help them through that, and we've had to increase the resource there, and that I can't ever see us being able to pull away from that. So for all of us, there's a permanent cost of increase of resource to be able to manage it. But ultimately, that's just with universal credit. It's all of the other things that kind of chip away in different, you know, the kind of examples we've given earlier. It's who knows? Honestly, I don't know. But for some people, it'll be okay. But it's the more vulnerable people that's really we've got to focus our effort on.
Yeah, I think the only thing you can be sure of is that I think RSLs are committed to housing vulnerable people, and that commitment won't change. So I think there will be a commitment. I'm sure all of us see an eviction as a failure. You know, we're not here to remove a home from people. We're to provide homes and to sustain the tenancies. That's what our business is about, and we're committed to that, no matter how sort of tough it gets. So we can certainly say that. I think the other thing that RSLs are, they are flexible organisations, and we're already having to morph into something different because of these challenges. And that might mean more shared services, or it might mean other opportunities we have to explore. But I think that flexibility is a real strength for RSLs as well.
Yeah, could we just stop a minute? The cameras become confused, I think. Could you make sure that your light is not on? See if it. That's all right. Then we'll see if it goes to the next person. Sorry, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah. Sorry, the only point I was going to make is a general comment about the housing market. My biggest concern is about young people and what the future holds for them. So the benefits being possibly taken away from 18 years and above, but also the access to open market housing, first-time buyers, is becoming increasingly difficult, and that seems to be where the biggest squeeze is going to be.
Just make a.
Richard, do you want to come in on this? Then I think it's Councillor Penny-Jones next.
A really quick comment, because in fairness, the DWP aren't here to defend themselves, and there is a political narrative behind this, and I know you did invite them, but they would be able to point to examples where their welfare reforms are a success, and that people have found work and have become less dependent on the welfare system. And that's probably what they would say is the hope for them from these changes, that we reduce welfare dependency and people are more financially independent.
Councillor Penny-Jones.
Yeah, just to add to that, which works well if they're able. I'm struggling to understand the rationale behind direct payments being withdrawn from the RSL to straight to the service users or the clients. I'm really struggling with that rationale. But following on from that, does it have any staff or cost implications for where you work, for the councils? Is that partly why it's being done? Is it a cost-saving measure? Because you are reducing 6 working benefits, aren't you? To 1, essentially. So that obviously has staff implications. Is that part of the rationale?
I think that was an original part of the rationale, but what happened was, when universal credit was first proposed, the DCLG fought a battle with DWP to retain council tax rebates within local authorities. We have Eric Pickles to thank for that. And that was a battle that he fought. So as a result, council tax rebates are not part of universal credit and are administered by local authorities. And that's a long way of making the point that I still need people to administer the claims process for council tax reduction. And we collect pretty much the same information for council tax reduction that we collect for housing benefit. So there isn't an administrative saving. There are in fact 2 claims processes working alongside one another, and we are being expected to provide local support for universal credit. So we're receiving administrative support from DWP to do that, to help with the arrangements. So there's actually a slight increase in the administrative burden.
I'm just going to add as well, in terms of the rationale for direct payment, I think that's one of our biggest criticisms, is that people haven't been given the choice. They're not being given the choice. I mean, that exists now. If people want their benefit paid direct, they can choose to have that, but they choose not to. And most of our tenants say, given the choice, they would choose not to, but they don't have that choice. And that's one of our biggest concerns.
It's ironic, isn't it? Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, I just want to go back to our discussions from this morning, because we did talk about the private sector and our RSLs. As you know, you are struggling to deliver a reference to properties, and we are looking at the private sector. And it's a question of Ian, really. You gave us a graph this morning of your tie-up with Torvine and in delivering homelessness and all the other options that we're looking at. Have you set anything aside to put in place, i.e. you've said here about people who come from the background of release from prison and stuff? I mean, there's going to be the issues of all the private landlords. Kevin touched on it. I just want to go a little bit deeper into it. They are the ones we're going to have to depend on. We've said this morning we're going to have to really depend on the private sector to deliver. What have you put in place then? Are we as an authority going to put something in place that we're going to have to help these private landlords if we want to sign them up, we want them to be on board? This ain't going to help at all, is it?
Yeah, I think there's a number of dynamics to our working with the private sector. I mean, the long and the short of it is we need to expand our opportunities into the private sector for a number of reasons. And I say that your most basic reason is that these guys here haven't got the capacity to absorb the demand, and the demand for housing association accommodation is very popular. Good landlords, good properties, reasonable rents. People want it, but there isn't enough to go around. So, and I think that's where we've now reinvested in terms of the structure that we've now got with the housing with Torvine through the housing options team, and we've got more staff that are going to be available to try and develop opportunities in the private sector, and it's going to be a battle. It's because private landlords in Monmouthshire can attract market rents, and that's where we start getting into difficulties.
I think you missed my point there. I think the point I'm making is these RSLs are putting things in place now, anticipating, and they have anticipated, that is going to be a problem here, whereas they can actually support that problem by 6 hours of dialogue, perhaps with clients. We are looking at a different market aspect here of the private sector, which is really difficult to get into. It's really difficult to get them on board. We've said that all this morning. Are we going to put things in place to actually convince the private sector with this reform that's going to happen? It is happening. It's going to come in September. We've been told that. What are you putting in place, or what are we going to put in place to do what these people are putting in place as well as? Whose responsibility does it come? Because if Mr. Landlord says, sorry, they are a risk to me, I want them out now, we are just back to where we started, aren't we? And I can see that coming, to be honest with you. It isn't going to be easy, but we need to think about putting something in place or working with the RSLs in helping us with the private sector to try and cope with what they're anticipating they're going to cope with. They're anticipating it. We haven't anticipated that yet, have we?
We very much have anticipated, and really that's really what the restructure of the housing options service has been about. So we've gone from a housing options team that essentially processes homeless applications, and we're increasingly trying to get into homeless prevention. But part of that homeless prevention is facilitating access into the private rented sector. But now we've also got a private sector housing team, which Karen Durant is the manager of. So there's now a resource of 4 or 5 people now that are about developing opportunities in the private rented sector and engaging with private landlords. And these guys here are part of that. I mean, Mellin provide our private leasing scheme, for example. We're looking at that. There's conversations with Justin and his colleagues about using that for, not just to discharge homeless duty, but also to prevent homelessness. Monmouthshire Housing have are acquiring properties as well. So there's lots of dynamics to it, and there's I don't think there's going to be any one quick fit and an easy solution. So we are going to be looking at combinations of things, but it's very much working towards creating those new opportunities.
So for you, Chair, so the universal credit problems that look like they're going to arise in the future, what you're saying is the private sector are going to be handled by your team in cooperation from the RSLs. Is that right?
It's going to be a range of options. I mean, the bottom line, our issue is going to be market rents. Private landlords in Monmouthshire can easily attract market rents which are well above housing benefit levels, and that's the key risk in Monmouthshire. And it's our ability, the housing association's ability, to engage with private landlords who are willing to charge rents within the housing benefit levels. And we're in a position at the moment where Richard's been really supportive, using the discretionary housing payments facility, but that can't go on forever, can it? It's convincing landlords to work with us and charge low rents.
Thank you very much. The last question I have on my list was from Councillor David Dovey.
Yes, Chairman. It is a gloomy picture, isn't it? And you never know where lightning is going to strike next. What happens in our economy knows no allegiance to anybody. For instance, I heard last night that Maybe Bridge is closing in Chepstow, with the implications for local people there, which is, well, a sad joke really, for us, if you like, a blue sky business like that to fail. But that wasn't what I wanted to say entirely. What I wanted to say was something about the housing associations that serve us as a county. Mainly, I have to deal with Mon Housing and Melin, and I want to say, really acknowledge how, and I include you in this. It's my experience. I really want to say how fortunate that we are to have the housing associations that we do. They go far beyond their remit. They, for instance, Melin with their apprenticeship schemes and whatnot. So they really do approach the problems of our more needy people in our society in a really quite holistic fashion. And I think we are particularly blessed with you guys doing what you do. And I, for one, would like to acknowledge and applaud what you do as a member of this committee. That's all.
Thank you, David. If I might, it's not copyright, is it? Might pinch that for my concluding remarks. Councillor Smith, I'm very conscious that when I said the list was closed, I had not recognised you.
Thank you very much. Very brief one. When were direct payments first? Because it hasn't come with universal credit. This was imposed years ago, and the implications and the problems that it's brought since, and the hardship, because it is cruel to some individuals, truly cruel.
Yeah, they were introduced in April 2008 as part of the local housing allowance arrangements. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the private rented sector has had to deal with these issues for that period of time. And I think it would be true to say that private landlords in Monmouthshire are not wholly enamoured of the prospect of universal credit being introduced.
Critical of it because, well, everybody must be, because it has put huge strains on individuals. There are some who will never cope, and there are some who have a desire to carry on and live their life, and it's an imposition, quite frankly. Very interesting situations over Wales and over England, the way the system works.
The last person who signalled a wish to speak is Councillor Harris. I'm going to take Councillor Harris's question or comment, then I've got a question, and then I'll try and do some summing up.
It's just a brief comment, Chair, echoing what David has said. I think the tenants of the housing associations we have in the county sometimes don't realise how lucky they are, and that's usually the way I approach any problems that I have with them. So keep up the good work.
Thank you for that. My question is whether actually, even at this point, we could say we are completely joined up, or as joined up as we might need to be. And I don't misunderstand me here, because I think all the things that we've heard are absolutely admirable. But I'm just wondering if we haven't got potentially another case of not exactly silo thinking, but we've got lots of people competing for the same territory. We've heard in Adult Select, adult education talk not dissimilarly about some of the things that the RSLs are tackling. We've certainly got CAB working in very similar territory. That's already been acknowledged. And I just wonder whether we couldn't do more to encourage kind of joining up. Because one of the messages not made too much of, but nevertheless there, that I've heard from our social landlords is you're having to almost refocus on the original, much more limited role that you might have been thought to have. Not that you would not do the other things or would want not to do the other things, but there is a real risk to your business, which is fundamentally about the proper management and of housing, is it not? So I just wonder whether there is any mileage in a suggestion of coming together on a slightly broader front. You know, are the CAB alongside you? Are there meetings? Are there sort of comings together as there are on the social services side, for example, between social services, private businesses looking at practice? Are there ways in which we could see whether, for example, one organisation could do something for another that it might not already be doing? It's probably a naive thought. But if resources are scarce, pressures are huge, it's really a matter of making sure that everybody is making the best contribution that they can, and they're already making a fantastic contribution. Would you like to come back on that, David?
Yeah, just quickly. I think just to clarify, there are already partnerships certainly in Monmouthshire which are looking at both financial inclusion and employment, and maybe they just need that little bit of reinvigoration at this point in time. I think added to that, there is also the Gwent Welfare Reform Partnership, which is the 5 local authorities in Gwent and the 9 RSLs who do look and try to look at things more strategically. So hopefully we're not there yet, and I think your comments are welcome at this point, perhaps to just revisit some of the terms of reference of those groups.
I'm very reassured by that, but also there's a potential, and I would urge anybody who has access to those fora or who goes to those kind of things to say, you know, are we doing enough to talk about the kind of issues that have come up today? Before I sum up, just one other, as you'd expect from me, slightly mischievous suggestion. If you want to get an historical perspective on this, go to Chepstow Museum. Amongst their many splendid exhibits is a fascinating little section on the poor law, parish relief, and how you move safely or otherwise from one parish to another, where the responsibilities fall. So if you want to be either reassured or depressed, whatever your cast of mind, a visit to Chepstow Museum on that particular topic would be to be commended. I'd like to sum up by particularly thanking our guests this morning. We weren't completely sure, which is why we were asking what kind of things were going on. And I take my cue from several councillors that we are indeed fortunate that we've got forward-looking, proactive RSLs working right across the piece to help their tenants. And I think that is to be applauded and to be commended. I think we've also been impressed, have we not, by what we've heard today of the engagement between the various players here with each other and with the council or councils. I think that's also to be commended. There's a limit to what we can do from this committee. I mean, our current preferred end piece is to write a letter to the cabinet member, and I'm perfectly happy to write to Mr. Duncan Smith in between his other duties, but I don't think that would have a huge effect. But we could, if it would help, certainly try and engage with the job centre system to see if we could get some of those issues addressed. I'd need some help with that. I don't know, to exactly what to say, bearing in mind what we've heard. But I would be willing to do that from the committee if that would help. I mean, I'd write to Ian Duncan Smith if you like, but I can't imagine he's short of a thing or two in his post bag. Is that David, Councillor Dovey?
Could I suggest it might be a good idea, perhaps as well, to write to our local MP? There is no reason why he shouldn't be aware of the issues that are facing our population. In lovely Monmouthshire, we have problems. He should be aware of them, I think.
I'd take advice on that. Councillor Smith,
yes.
and then
Chairman,
I must draw this item to a conclusion.
There's been reference made to the 5 authorities across Gwent. There's a group obviously working and looking at welfare. What's our representation from Monmouthshire on that body? Who's our representative? And when do we ever receive any reports on what's being talked about?
Does anybody know?
I'm the representative on the Gwent group that's been referred to. Probably what would be useful would be to you've made a lot of reference to the DWP, and we work very closely, as does Richard and the housing associations, with our local DWP rep. And we've actually got a staff event coming up next week, which is basically it's a multi-agency event aimed at frontline staff in respect of universal credit coming in. So that's in here next week. I don't know where we are in terms of numbers, but numbers are actually getting quite tight. But what I can do, I can facilitate WP contact in terms of yourselves, and we've actually got a very a proactive local representative who I'm sure will be quite happy to come and talk with yourselves and engage with you. I guess that it's a very different type of organisation to what we're used to. But I know certainly the local people that we're dealing with are very keen to work with us at a job centre level and at a DWP level. And I think they would be very happy to come and talk to you.
That would be helpful. Equally, I think it would be helpful for us if you and anybody, if you go to that meeting, and from the sounds of it, you're the only one in present company who'll be going, or have I misheard that? You're right. Thank you. Then both of you go together and say that you've been to this committee, elected members are concerned, we're encouraging of people working together, and we're just not sure that everything is yet quite as well in place as it should be. And you can go stronger than that if you like, because if you need help, that's the best way we can give it. I'm quite happy for you to go to that meeting with a message from the committee. I'm sure members will be.
Absolutely.
Yep. And perhaps we could consider inviting them in, not necessarily to meet with the committee. Scrutiny of external bodies. Be interesting. Right. Thank you. We're way over time. I was thinking we'd be finished by 11, but it's 5 to 1. We now have one, and of course, you appreciate that asking people to come in may be a way ahead, may be more about when we revisit these matters in, say, 12 months, rather than more immediately, because we've just got to accommodate existing agendas. We still have item 4.2 to consider. So, homeless prevention. If you'd like to go, please go. If you'd like to stay, you're very welcome. Thank you for your time and your contributions. two recommendation on cabinet on this one. Recommendation is that we receive the presentation. We just need a brief introduction from Ian, and then we need to decide what we want to say or what we're going to do.
Okay, well, I can whiz through the next bit. I mean, the next bit basically was an update on homeless prevention and homeless performance, and I don't think there's any particular need for me to go into great detail. Basically, everything, certainly up until April, was always heading in the right direction. We are getting more demand for assistance through the housing options team. That has gone up, but the number of homeless applications that we're determining is going down. Our duty is going down. Our B&B placements has gone down, albeit we've had to place 3 so far in B&B this year. But all being well, we won't have to place any more. I've put that's highlighted in red because our projection is 12, but that's purely based on the fact that we've accommodated 3 people at the beginning of the year. Families in B&B, we got to the magic position of 0 last year, which was fantastic, but unfortunately we've had to accommodate one household for a few days. So again, but you know, we're still talking low numbers. And our average stay in B&B it's all in the right direction, So I'm quite confident and pleased with the position that we're in the moment. And then conversely, and this is obviously where the new legislation is taking us, our ability to prevent homelessness, the trend is increasing, and our so the number of people that we're dealing with has gone up, and our success rate has gone up, and the percentage of potentially homeless prevented for at least 6 months, that was a statutory performance indicator, and obviously we've been able to demonstrate an improved position over the last 3 years. I've got to say that is the difficult area in Monmouthshire. That is still a risk for us compared with many other local authorities. We haven't got the private sector that we can default to because of obviously landlords want safe tenants, and we're, again, you've got to take the positives out of it. We're in a fortunate position where none of our housing association partners have got unpopular stock. Generally the stock is in high demand. Other authorities where they've got less populace are able to discharge into those properties. So and we haven't got that luxury. But up until April, and so far to now, we're in a positive position.
Thank you, Ian. From the discussion before, from the pre-meeting, there were 3 councillors who signalled, that I've noted anyway, who signalled a wish to ask a point on the paper here. Yeah. Councillor Simon Howarth, and then Councillor Wintle, and then, oh sorry, David Hill, you had a question as well, I think. If you still want to ask those, please do so. Simon.
Yeah, thanks. Following on from our last report, and following on from our report, a place called Horn, 2008 we saw very limited people requesting or became homeless. I remember sitting in meetings with the cabinet member there. It was 2008 when the recession was about to come upon us, the world recession, etc., etc. We have had an increase. Now you're telling us it's decreasing. Are we likely now to see problems arising with homelessness, with the welfare reforms coming in place, with the last report as well, within Monmouthshire? And if we are anticipating that, are we putting things in place then to, will we be looking for extra funding there? How would you react to that if things in the next 6 months become where we feel we're stepping out of it, but now we're going to go back into it? with what's happening there? How are you going to respond to that in financial terms? How will we handle that, Ian?
Well, there's a number of factions to that, and obviously the restructure and the merger of the housing options team is the starting point of that. And in terms of us having flexibility now, what the partnership with Torvine now has opened up our resources, their resources to us, but equally our resources are now open up to them. And interestingly, I think that Torvine have probably benefited more out of ourselves, which is probably not what I expected actually to start with, but I think that's just circumstances and a bit of a quirk over the recent times. But I think picking up the point about how we're preparing, it is literally a case of trying to maximise the number of options and the ranges that we have got available to us to support that, and it really is about getting into the private sector and developing those relationships, and I suppose getting assurances to private landlords that this we're not a risk really. Remembering though that we are dealing with some very vulnerable clients, and I suppose that's where your pick and mix approach comes in really. So it's quite difficult to answer you per se, but the bottom line is that our focus and our emphasis is on expanding our range of options, expanding the choice, so we've got that ability to pick and mix really.
Can I just ask one question there? We don't stand as any collateral in this, do we? I.e., if somebody says to me, well, I've got no problem, I've got 2 properties there, but I'm unsure whether I will have my rent on time or will have some back rent at the end of it all, who will stand as collateral? Because generally you put a bond down, don't you, when you rent a property now? There'd be no bond on these circumstances, will there? So, I mean, when we have a homeless person or homeless family, let's say, we're looking to rehouse, would we stand as some collateral then, say, look, if it doesn't work out here, yes, we will make sure as a landlord, because that's what they're after, I think, a lot of them, isn't it? Some reassurances that they are safeguarded.
Yeah, I mean that's without doubt. Private landlord wants to minimise their risk and maximise their rent. Of course they do, and we do work very very closely and creatively with private landlords to try and minimise those risks. So we do have a pot of money which we call spend to save. It's not really spend to save anymore, but we do have that pot of money that we can use flexibly and use to pay private landlords to support us. Richard from Housing Benefit is very involved with that because we link that with our discretionary housing payments. So we've actually got a budget of about £30,000, and because of the discretionary housing payments pot, that's actually made that budget go a lot further. But I think really it's what more can we do, and that's really got to be the focus of reassuring private landlords to come and work with us, and having the confidence that we, the collective we, are not a risk.
Thank you. I like the word budget. Councillor Wintle and then David Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear you're finally getting the what's called this housing problem, not housing problem, the homelessness thing down, and you're not using bed and breakfast so much, because I know in the past it was a nightmare, and that used to take most of the budget. So I'm just concerned now. Is there any specific area of people coming, the type of people coming into presenting as homeless now?
Not that springs off the page. I think the profile and trend is, and don't ask me to repeat that, but I'm not aware of it being particularly different. The one big issue probably for us is young single people. That's the difficulty. And part of that is because the housing associations haven't got the single person stock. The housing benefit rules are stacked against them. So that's the area, and obviously the ideal scenario is young single people remain at home longer. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. I suspect it probably will to some extent, but it does put I suppose my aspiration is that we set up the shared housing scheme, which has worked fantastically well for us. That's been the key to us reducing our use of bed and breakfast. It's created an additional housing option in Monmouthshire. Some of my aspiration in terms of going forward is identifying people that are willing to take in lodgers. So I think that's a key area that I would hope by now we would have actually been able to put a bit more resource into developing that. But that would be a key area for us to find landlords that are willing to take in a live-in lodger. And I think there's lots of benefits around that, but it's not part of the Monmouthshire landscape lodging per se. So I think there's probably a bit of work ahead to get that off the ground.
Yes, that was the area I thought was where the problem was going to be, and I know in the past we used to use the hostels for house training, because some of these youngsters, young people, especially young men, are having their backsides wiped at home. That when they get out into the real wide world, they've got no experience how to look after a property, themselves, and the like. And my concern is that if you go your scheme and put them in lodgers, some people will find that they've got the cuckoo in the nest, more or less.
Just to come back on that, I think that's the growth service area, supporting people to prepare for independent living. And again, it's probably something I would have hoped by now we would have done a little bit more on. But I think the key area is when people are coming through to us, whether it's through homelessness or whether it's people when they're going onto the housing register, we're developing a relationship with them and preparing them for independent living. And we've had conversation with MHA about I'll call it trainer flats for want of a better expression. But I think you're right, that does need to be a growth area that we do need to look at. So, because it isn't uncommon, as soon as we rehouse somebody with a housing association, everything goes wrong. Have issues budgeting, have issues filling forms in, etc., etc. So you're absolutely right, and I think that's a key area of work that we need to plug.
Could I just add to that? I suppose what we're expecting to be announced in today's budget is that the government are proposing removing housing benefit from 18 to 21-year-olds. So even if we found them the accommodation, it's unlikely that their rent would be paid for them anyway. So I don't know what's going to happen to those people. So
thank you for that. And David Hill, and I think looking at the clock, this is probably going to have to be the last question.
if you look at 3.5 on page sort of 10 of your the 4.2 paper there, it starts off by saying percentage of potentially homeless prevented for at least 6 months has increased. And then the second bullet point is says homeless applications are falling and determinations have been reduced by so much. But then under the third bullet point there, it appears to suggest that people who are actually accepting the offers have been turning them down at the rate of about 40 to 50%. So that there's half of the kind of offers of homes that you're making are not actually being taken up, and yet we seem to be kind of short of accommodation from what you're saying.
No, I think you're. I mean, basically, what those figures they're not. There's not 100% correlation between the two, albeit there is a strong correlation. The bottom line is people, if you like, in the olden days, people would approach us as homeless, which is a statutory duty, and we would process them. And I've got to say, probably attitudes have changed, because I think there was an expectation that we did accept people and we did accommodate people through homelessness, and the homelessness duty was a good thing, and of course it is still a good thing. But obviously the expectation now is that still exists as a safety blanket. But as people are coming through, the expectation and requirement now is that we prevent that homelessness before it comes through. And I think that's what's been difficult over the recent years. We've had to change our emphasis and focus when people come through the door. To assist us, and to assist people, and we've done that. We've definitely achieved that, and we've been a lot more creative. We're a lot more flexible. People think differently, and it's not just us. Obviously, the housing associations and other support agencies support that. But I mean, what I can be confident with, those figures are all in the right direction, and we've got a far more proactive service. I say the threat in the middle of all this is we still haven't got enough affordable housing, and we still haven't got those clear routes into private sector housing that we would like. And albeit I'm very pleased, I'm very proud of those figures and where we've got to, we are still on a very delicate position, and I know Torvine, they've had to place quite a number of people in bed and breakfast over the last few months, which we've not had to, but again, it just shows the balance, and it wouldn't take much of an increase in numbers for us to for our figures to start going the wrong way. So it's really important that we try and develop these alternative options. And I say that the issue is those alternative options. There isn't going to be one big, massive solution. You think, save the day. It's not. It's going to be a range of options that help a little bit there, a little bit there, and a little bit there. And in the heart of that, it's persuading landlords that we're not a risk to work with and our clients aren't a risk with. And that's the key bit, because I say private landlords don't need our trade. So
the bit about, though, that you've got a duty to make sure that you've got suitable accommodation available is obviously presumably partly in the private sector, as you're talking about, but does it extend to you trying to help the housing associations to build more stuff about? Yeah, okay.
Right, well, thank you. Same policies, of course, will also be affecting them. I'd like to bring this to a conclusion because it is lunchtime.
Quick comment. We've discussed the homelessness and we seem to be talking about the adults.
Thank you, Councillor White. I was going to observe that some of the issues that we've touched on sooner or later may well have to come to children and young people, particularly the impact on the younger people with changes to benefits. And your point is well made, Councillor White. There's also what happens to looked after children in this context. There's also what happens to people leaving places such as Mountain House, and I'm surprised, David, that you haven't mentioned it, but if you don't, I will, because in all seriousness, we easily forget that these are our most vulnerable young people. So at some point, I think we might want to look at some of this through the medium of, say, children and young people. I'd like to bring us to a conclusion. I'd like to thank Ian, who has stayed with us all the way through. I'd like to thank all those who have supported the various papers and are still in the room. In terms of the received the presentation, and we appreciate that, and thank you very much, both of you. But we were to use the report to scrutinise whether services are being delivered in line with expectations and are contributing to agreed outcomes. My sense of how you've been handling this is overall yes, but there are still, obviously, ongoing areas in need of attention that we will want to hear about again, and Ian has already pointed us to those. Is that a satisfactory conclusion? Can I thank you all for staying the course? Members of both committees have come together. You've had to put up with me in the chair, but we've had some complex issues, and I think at the same time as they've been complex, they were potentially fraught with difficulty, because they do open doors to other worlds, to other arenas, and they challenge us also, of course, profoundly, as scrutiny committees should. The fact that some of these issues are matters that we will want to take action on elsewhere is beside the point. As a committee, I think we have taken our responsibilities very seriously and done as good a job as we can in the circumstances. And now, instead of saying go home and prepare for government, I say go home and prepare to read the budget, listen to the budget when you get back. And thank you all very much indeed. Meeting is closed.